OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. It is Wednesday the 20th of May. Myself and Eoin Sheahan are with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10 o'clock. Great show lined up for you today. Talking with Lenny Abrahamson, who is obviously the director and executive producer of Normal People, which has taken the world by storm. That's coming your way on the OTB Culture Hall of Fame a little bit later on. We're also going to hear from Kevin Kilbane about the last decade of the Aviva, and we're going to play a little bit of Lance Armstrong because obviously he's back in the news with the sense that his two-part tell-all, because he hasn't already told all, obviously, and still has a bit more of his truth to divulge. A new two-part documentary from ESPN is coming your way fairly soon, I think, Eoin, isn't that right? By the end of the month?
Yeah, by the end of the month is the 30th of May. I stand corrected on that if I'm wrong on that one. But certainly within the next two and a half weeks, it's going to drop. My truth is what Lance Armstrong says he is going to bring to the table. So at least he started to bring that language to the table. You know, before it always seemed very definitive. What I say is correct and what I say is the truth. Now he's come up with the phrase "my truth," which is just a PR person's dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's much better because obviously my truth is different to your truth about how we're experiencing this precise moment right now. If we want to get into those type of gymnastics about, you know, all of us experiencing things differently, time of the flat circle, all that kind of stuff.
My truth is that Kerry are the team of the decade when it comes to the 2000s. Your truth is that Tyrone are the team of the decade when it comes to the 2000s. My truth is basically opinion. That's what it is, Lance. There's no such thing as subjective or objective truth. The truth is the truth, and lies are lies. My truth is an opinion. So I'm looking forward to Lance Armstrong's slew of opinions coming our way on ESPN in a couple of weeks.
I love the way you just backed yourself into a corner where you and Lance are the same. When you're talking about Kerry in the noughties, you're the same as Lance Armstrong when he's talking about the 7 maillot jaunes, as he has in his Twitter bio. He's gone back to like, yeah, I got those yellow jerseys. Those yellow jerseys are mine. I earned them.
Whoa. What are you trying to suggest about Kerry's All-Ireland wins in the 2000s here? I was more making the comparison between you and Lance.
Your inability to see the truth, the actual truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I like the way you aligned yourself there with Lance Armstrong. Good man, Eoin. We're like slowly chiseling away the decades of what you've gone through living in Kerry. Now that you're, you know, one of us living in the metropolitan area, a metropolitan media elite, you're finally coming to your senses. It's okay. It's a beautiful thing. It's like the chrysalis falling away, and this is now Eoin the butterfly.
There's nothing elite about me, I will tell you that. But yeah, like you can definitely become ensconced in your nonsense, for example. The problem is not living in Dublin. The problem is just hearing you spout on about this. Like you actually slip this take into literally everything, but I've become conditioned to slip the take into this unnecessarily this morning. That's how I've become snared into this, by constantly bringing up this conversation that isn't even a conversation. But anyway, these bizarre takes that you tend to come up with regards, like the Kerry Tyrone thing is a perfect example. Just a fairly
obvious thing. It's like it's one of the most obvious things. It's one of the most obvious takes ever that the whole world, apart from Kerry people, can actually see is true. But we again somehow managed to go down this cul-de-sac at your prompting. I just want to point that out. You brought this up. You compared yourself to Lance Armstrong. It's like that banker the other day comparing himself to Jesus Christ. He lost 18 billion and he was like, oh, I'm very misunderstood, just like Jesus Christ was. It's like, that's a great comparison to be making at the moment here. You, Lance Armstrong, that bank dude, and Jesus Christ, the four of you are like, you know.
Your Mount Rushmore of the 33rd county, if there was one.
A deck of cards, even. Right, 0879 180 180 is the number. Horace Grant has been out saying that it's all lies.
Yeah, lies, damn statistics is Horace Grant this morning. He's been kind of giving a withering assessment, I think it's fair to say, of obviously Michael Jordan, who he used to play with. Horace Grant, like he says that the show crossed the line. He's part of 3 titles with Chicago Bulls, and you would have expected that everybody would have fallen in line and said, good on you, Michael. But there have actually been a couple of dissenting voices. We've had Craig Hodges out a couple of weeks ago talking about the episode when it came to Republicans buy sneakers too. Wasn't overly happy with his omission, and we've got Horace Grant coming out as well. He says the documentary was entertaining, but as teammates, we know 99 or 90% of it was BS in terms of the realness of it. And I think when it comes to the realness of it, like my whole issue with it was that I'd never any problem with Michael Jordan coming out and bashing everybody left, right, and centre. My issue, perhaps, if I had to take one with it, was that there perhaps wasn't enough dissenting voices given the opportunity to bash Michael Jordan back. And if even it resulted in Michael Jordan having the last laugh or coming out on top, I don't care as long as there was a bit more light and shade to it. So I think it's good to start hearing this, and I wonder will we see more names come out of the woodwork over the next couple of weeks. But I think Horace Grant has a reputation of being a little bit bitter, or you wouldn't be surprised that he is the name to come out now, or one of the first ones to lead the charge against the Last Dance.
We'll come back to this a little bit later on as well, because lots of Michael Jordan stuff in the papers today, and we'll get to the papers just after 8 o'clock this morning. But now let's bring you some Pat and Evan goodness from the football show last night. Have a look.
Now then, you're welcome along to this evening's football show. Later on, we'll check in with Nathan Murphy, but as we do every week, Pat and Evan is with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you as well. Are you well?
I'm very well. I hope you are too.
Fantastically so. I've had one of those really busy days today. I was kind of a wee bit late getting onto you for a number of reasons. I'd fallen into writing something, but before that I'd been doing a Radio 4 thing, so I had to get all my language correct. I had to get all my long words all run, in a row. But everyone wants to talk about what's going on in football at the moment. There's plenty of topics. There's no lack of topics. We thought there would be a lack of topics. Yeah. Actually, there's not. Every single time anything different happens, it's dissected.
Are you a Radio 4 listener?
Well, obviously. That's my go-to radio station. Bit of Six Music as well. Massive into podcasts, like a lot of people, particularly off the ball. But lots science programs and things like that. I mean, it's one of the joys of life at the moment, that if you're driving somewhere or going anywhere, listening to podcasts is brilliant. You just go online and find what your interest is and get an expert and learn. It's brilliant.
It's true. So you said one of the reasons you were slightly late getting to us is you were writing a piece, and you did that great thing, which is you lost yourself in the task at hand, which is always a good sign. So the plan was to do 1,000 words of a chapter on homophobia in football, and it morphed. Yeah,
that was about 3 years ago. So anyway, 4,000 words later, I was battering away, and then I forgot that you were calling. And it's such an interesting area, and it always was such an interesting area. It's such a developing area as well. In my early days when I came down, I mean, I kind of looked different. I looked unusual. I looked not like the other players, and I was a bit punky. I wasn't averse to wearing a beret, so I got a bit of stick for being gay. People used to say it. Now, I happen not to be gay, but what surprised everybody at the time was if they said, "You're gay," I'd say, "Well, actually, I'm not." And they went, "Well, you don't seem offended." And I said, "Well, what, should I be?" Mm-hmm. I don't actually see it as an offensive slur. And it really confused people at the time, football fans particularly. I remember playing against West Ham. I mean, they gave me that kind of stuff all the time. And more often than not, I never was offended by it. I'd sometimes turn around and give them a wee wink or blow them a kiss. It seemed to annoy them a wee bit more, but most can take the banter. But it was such a big thing that, if you were different, that's what you got. Now you get that for fans, you get that from some other players. Now, I got it quite a bit because I was unusual and different interest, but I didn't care. Problem was, other people had bigger problems than me, like the young acolyte coming behind me was Graham Lasso.
Yeah.
It was kind of harder for Graham because he got it worse than me because he had the other interests as well, and he was an England player, and football was getting bigger and bigger when he was in the limelight. So when it was aimed at him, it seemed to upset him. And I used to talk to Graham quite a lot about it and say, "Graham, just laugh about it, mate. It shouldn't be a slur." But he made a very good point at the time saying, in actual fact, but that's fair enough. But you didn't have it as long as I've had it, and you didn't have it as high profile and constant as I had it. And it's fair enough. It's okay. I mean, I'm kind of comfortable with myself, and I kind of come from a rough East End of Glasgow background, so kind of sticks and stones, guys. It's not going to get me. You know?
I never realised that you had suffered with it. I knew Lasso had, and it was very high profile. And I remember as a teenager reading his book, which he wrote himself, by the way. It was a departure at the time, and it really haunted him. It was really difficult for him. And he was conscious as well of not wanting to come out too strongly and say, I'm not gay. I mean, am I? You don't want to come out and imply that there's anything wrong with being gay, but he definitely felt it. And I do remember the passage where he describes the embarrassment when Robbie Fowler turned around and pointed to his backside, and the whole ground erupted, and you just feel like you withdraw into yourself and horrible, and a huge effect on him. I never realised you had got anything in that vicinity.
Yeah, but it was kind of common, I think.
Was it?
A lot of people got it. I mean, if you look back at 60s, 70s, 80s, there was a different country. I mean, it was a different world. The past is a different country. And there was casual racism, there was casual sexism, there was casual homophobia, and it was around all the time. Now, I come from a quite enlightened background where we just didn't accept it or laughed at it or thought, well, you're just being ignorant. So when you come with that utter confidence, it's fine.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you said a word there, and I know you didn't mean it, and I'm not digging you up, but you
Go
said
on.
you suffered from it as well. I didn't suffer.
Okay, you didn't suffer, but Graham Lasso suffered from it for sure. It is a form of abuse. I mean, it's interesting you classify it as banter. I mean, we certainly wouldn't now, would we?
I wouldn't classify it as banter. I would say they think it's banter when they say it. I don't think it is. I never thought it was, but that's what they thought it was. On the other hand, I didn't take it as abusive, or I didn't take it, in any way other than I would take it straight on and say, "Oh, interesting, you thought that," but no, I'm not actually.
Yeah. And
then smile, and they go, "Where'd you go from there?" And if you can intellectually sort of just stare in someone's eyes and say that, now you'll get the odd meathead who comes up with, just anger and abuse and, vocabulary that's not the nicest. You don't care about the enemy, do you? I don't.
Some people do. Some people do,
I don't. And maybe that's the confidence I had. And to be honest, it's interesting you talk about that, because I was writing about that there, trying to understand it's okay for me. The thing is, it was okay for me. I didn't care. I mean, my girlfriend was quite surprised about it most of the time. And she would go, "Do you think you're gay?" And I went, "Yeah, I do. I think it might be the berry." And she would just laugh, and so would I laugh. But maybe, others, maybe, I'm not saying Graham had it, but maybe he was looking for a girlfriend at the time and thinking, I won't get one because everyone says I'm gay.
Yeah.
And if everyone thinks it, and an entire stadium thinks it, maybe the world thinks it, and it can be, it could understandably affect people. But I think what was more interesting actually writing about was actually, for me, how you would react now within the game, or how it would have been taken then. Now, in actual fact, I think it's different from how people see it, because it's like, if you go in a football, or even in factory, in your work or whatever, people will look for your weakness and give you abuse. Yeah, whatever it is, right? So I've had, baldy, big head, big nose, tight, skinny wee guy, you name it. Jewish. I'm not Jewish, but I get that. Used to get that. All those things, none affected me whatsoever. So I know it's just an effect, and they were just trying to get it. But there's specific things about the kind of homophobic stuff, because that means they can't come out. And I've always said, the moment a player comes out, and it's a high-profile player, it'll be actually fine. Within the game, it will be okay. It seems an odd dichotomy to explain that there are one or two homophobic and very homophobic players in the football teams, but there is in society anyway. The vast majority, if you're a good enough player, that'll be good enough.
Certain practicality will kick in. Though we had Damien Delaney on a while back, and he was saying he wasn't so sure that there would be players from around the world, different religious beliefs, who would be very uncomfortable with it in a dressing room and would have said it openly enough in a dressing room. Now, he also said the majority in the dressing room told that player to shut up,
exactly,
be quiet. So ultimately, a dressing room might find a way. I guess
I'm comfortable with you. I'm really, really quite comfortable. But that's easy for me to say, because I wouldn't have to go through it. the guy who's going to be the first guy comes out and have to go through it. It's easy for me to say, but he's no longer a footballer. He's now a cause celeb. He's now only a gay footballer.
Well, he's defined by it, and that's the problem. And who wants to be defined by it ahead of their football? Because that is the price you will pay, in effect. You are the gay footballer.
Exactly. And again, so that you can tell, that's why I got lost in writing this stuff, because you start peeling it away, and as soon as you start peeling it away, it's not as simplistic as people think it is, and it certainly wasn't as simplistic as I made it for myself. I just tore it, shredded it, and went, deal with it, guys. I happen to be straight. If you think I'm gay, I don't care. It is of no effect to me whatsoever. However, it's actually easy for me. It's much harder for other people. And I was trying to explain why, and the reasons why, and what it would be like to walk in, and also other things around it. Like, I know one or two players that were a bit effete, really, really quite effete. They weren't gay, but all those things all sort of come back in, and we're all fed into each other. And of course, there are the ones that were clearly homophobic, and I knew, and one or two of them. I can remember once, a nightclub. I didn't go to clubs, but my girlfriend and I, now wife, we were at this nightclub with the Chelsea players, and we were chatting, and I met Clang, name drop, Elton John, and Elton John was chatting away. Now, Elton wants to talk to me about football, and I want to talk to him about music, obviously, because my interest. And we ended up having this great conversation, and Annabelle and I were chatting to him for ages. And then one of the lads came back, walked by and shouted, "Hey lads, watch your arses, Elton's around." And it was this most horrible, horrible moment. And Elton looked devastated, and he had a good line back.
Sorry, Elton, he said this in front of Elton John?
Yes, so that everyone could hear. Exactly. I mean, and Elton looked, and Elton said something, I heard that ducky or something like that, to play it up. But he was clearly upset.
Yeah.
And I was furious. And I had a word with the player, but I left. I no time. I didn't want to go the night out with them. But that was it. I was going home. Because if I don't hang about with people that do that sort of thing, say that sort of thing. And, I remember thinking at the time, I didn't actually think he was one of them. But he thought that was funny. He thought that was banter. And it kind of happened. So there's all those things. And Elton wants to be part of football. And at that time, he was kind of, the people that idiots like that were pushing him away from it. Now, thankfully, we've kind of moved on. And to be fair, when I mentioned it to one or two of the lads that night, they were all furious with that player as well. So that's the point. We hear the loud voices, like many things in life. Don't listen to all the loud voices. Listen to everyone. And then you get a better view of what society's like.
Mm. So I'm sure you tease all this out in your article. The situation then is twofold. You have the current player right now who is maybe toing and froing, maybe open in their life and to plenty of their teammates or some of their teammates, but he's hesitant over the next step and having to deal with the first, reveal. I mean, it's even crazy to talk in these terms compared to pretty, any other office or.
When you think about sport, lots of other sports have been there, gone there, done that, and moved on.
Yes, moved on very quickly. The second question, which is just as interesting, and you referenced it there in part. So if we look at society and the percentage of people who are not heterosexual, then, and if you apply that to sport, then there's any number in terms of, say, the Premier League of gay players. And yet that actually might be much smaller than it is in society, because we can only imagine the numbers who might have loved the game and playing football and who very, very, very early on realized this is not the environment for me. The story you just told, imagine there was a gay player as a teammate. He's certainly not coming out to that room. So I wonder, is football providing a more inclusive atmosphere for gay players who are attracted to the game, but not so attracted to everything else that might go with it?
It's a brilliant question. That's why I'm writing. And that's why I get a chance to ever talk about it. Is because to say, look, this is going to be a wee bit more welcoming than you think. I really do. You don't know it yet, and it takes the first one, but it's going to be more welcoming. Now, I can tell you, of all the players I played with through an entire career, 19-year career, played with a lot of players. I know of one who was gay. Now, I'm not saying there was, I'm sure there was more than one who was gay.
Yeah.
But I found out many years later that one guy, and I didn't know. He hadn't come out. Currently, he is out now with his friends, and that's absolutely fine. It was great. But what really got me, and it was a brilliant moment, it only happened a year ago, I was sitting beside 3 teammates who had been teammate of this guy. And somebody else said, do you know so-and-so's, I won't out him because he's not asked to be outed. So they said, do you know so-and-so is gay? And he's out with his friends. And these 3 teammates from that time, remember, 80s, turned around and said, oh, really? That's a shame he didn't tell us. It'd have been okay. And the other one went, yeah, it must have been really hard for him. He said he lived with his mum. Maybe that's why. That's the level. There's nothing more other than, I wish he could have told us. And I kind of look at it and think, if only the push could come from somewhere. And it's going to take a big character, a big personality that's going to walk in and do it. Although I think about it, you're heading towards another interesting area of this. This is why I try to squeeze in at 4,000 words. The other area is, are there really a kind of a mirrored amount of gay people playing football at the top level than there is gay people in society? Not sure. Not absolutely convinced about that, to be honest. I think it's going to be much smaller.
Yeah. Where are we going to read this article and when's it coming out?
We're not going to read the article because it's going to be in my book. I decided to, I kind of finished it ages ago, but the publishers keep on coming back. Could you do something about that? Could you do something about that? We're getting our money's worth, these people. But to be honest, it's really interesting talking about, areas that you think, have they been covered in any real depth? Have they been considered, And it's kind of, when I get down to the last line, I know I need to write something about, as soon as I talk about it, I know some people say, he's gay then. Or if I write about it in the book, they'll go, oh, he's got a whole chapter on homophobia. He must be gay then. And I go, so?
Yeah.
No, but I don't care. That was the thing that publishers and people say, are you not worried about that? And I would say, no.
I would think the other thing, and so I'm kind of thinking as I'm going here, because I have a list of, I was going to start talking to you about the Bundesliga. So that was where my head was at for the previous hour. The other thing which would strike me if I was a 22, 23-year-old that I would be fearful of, as well as being described as the gay footballer more than I might like, is also the abuse from the crowd.
And online.
And online, sure, yeah. And how that's treated is something the game will have to have a think about at various levels. For instance, as you said, football crowds pick out whatever weakness it is, be it big nose or you're ginger. It's just used as a way of getting at the opposition players. That is the culture. Now, there is a line we have drawn, and so racist abuse is way beyond that line. So where will homophobia fall in that line? How seriously will it be taken? Will we have stadium announcers saying, unless the homophobic abuse stops, if it was to happen, the game will stop, as we do with racism? And finding that line, that's something the game will have to, you would be ready for, and you would hope are talking about now. How do we treat this in the stands?
Piece of gate, right beside racism. Dead easy. You just stick it right beside it. It's fine. There's just no acceptance because, and I feel, again, quite comfortable because although it took us years to get all those thousands of people to understand, hey, wait a minute, we don't do this here. And the vast majority, I know there's still some do it, the vast majority don't. Some of them might think it, but they don't. You just make it clear, this doesn't happen here. And if you make it clear right at the start, and I think it has been, well, I know it's been made clear. Some of us, you can go back to exactly 20 years ago when we wrote a statement when I took over at Motherwell of what our club was about. And that was on the statement 20 years ago. We don't care about your race, colour, sexuality, the whole world, and we will not allow that at our football club. Now, we were probably the first club to put that in our statement and say, this is what we think, this is the ethos, and it's up everywhere, and it's in the programme every week, and this is what we think, and it's on the website. But everyone would do it now. Every club would do it now, and they would do it at a drop of a hat. So, again, I don't want to make it sound as if it's easy. It's not easy, but doable, yes. And can you imagine one thing? Can you imagine someone, I'm not the biggest fan as a football player as David Beckham. I thought he was okay. He was a good player, right? Bex, here's your time, mate. Someone like Beckham would be fabulous to say, there's a gay player here. I'm behind him 100%. I'm going to stick by him. I'm going to support him as much as possible. And I think Beckham would do that. I think he's just the right kind of guy to do that. He's the right type of role model, and he's a strength of personality in the world stage and generally loved in his country. you would be nailed on the right kind of guy to do that. And by the way, you would be holding people back, like Lineker and all that. They'd be desperate to get involved and say, we're not accepting any homophobia.
Sure.
So that's why I think it wouldn't be it wouldn't be sort of an entities like me to be standing up at that point.
Yeah, no, I would think in the main you're right. So let's park that for a moment. When's this book of yours out?
Yeah, good point. If they'd just let me finish it, it would possibly be November, I think. It's kind of, I could get it out as soon as possible, but you wouldn't want it out now anyway, because nobody's going to bookshops.
Book tour isn't so good.
Not so good. And also, you get these weird things. I mean, the listeners might be interested, because I don't really know about these things. So, you know, you write it, and I wrote it in an unusual way. I just wrote it, and then said to the publisher, do you want that? It's kind of a weird way to do it. They usually come to you first.
Yes.
I said, do you want that? And they went, yeah, okay. And then they say, right, we might be able to get that out in about 2 years. What? I've written it now. But when you start talking to them about, you know, the legal it, they have to check the edits, they have to check that everything's absolutely correct about it. They then have to see what's the right time in marketing, you know, and then you're in a machine at that point in time. So I'm trying to ignore that machine and just think, right, okay, you let that go on with it. I'll just do the writing stuff, you know.
So it's not an autobiography. It's a concepts, thoughts on the game, that kind of a thing. It's
certainly hung around the skeleton of an autobiography.
Okay.
I'd say that. It's hung around the skeleton of it. It's just I'll be honest with you, I can whisper it to you. That was just to get the stories out. Because people will be interested in autobiography and what you've gone through. So it's there. But the reason for doing it is to get a point across or a story across. And if I want anything about this, and I know I'm talking about a very serious subject here, but see at the end of this, and I write this, see if it's not funny, I'm going to throw it into the river. I don't want to see it. I want it to be funny. That's when I did was a much more po-faced kind of thing. So hopefully a bit of humour in it as well. So when it does come out, eventually, you can tell me if it makes you laugh.
Good. Well, you can send us a copy for sure. So Bundesliga, did you bother to watch any? Were you enthused or curious bystander? What did you watch any games in full?
Yeah, that's the last part of your question's a cracker. In full. To be fair, that is the thing, isn't it? And many people, you know, tuned into it, and then after 10 minutes, you're thinking, yeah, there's not a lot of excitement here. There's a game of football. The technical side of it's is okay, but you know, where's the oomph? You know, because there's no fans there, etc. I have to, like many people, I don't actually watch that many games just purely for a game of football. I have to have some interest, whether it's a team I like, somebody I know, or a brilliant player, or a technical interest. Right? There has to be something that gets me. So it takes 10 or 15 minutes. And if nothing special is hitting me, I'm off. I'm just ashamed, but I'm off. The one that caught me is the one I thought would catch me was the Union Berlin versus Bayern Munich. And I just wanted to see. I like Bayern Munich a lot. I'd actually been talking to the guy, Nevin Subotic, from Union Berlin the week before anyway. He was talking very interesting points about what he thought about coming out of the lockdown. And he wasn't convinced about it. Actually, he probably was less convinced about it because he gave away a penalty, didn't he? But there need to be an interest in there. And I found enough interest in that one. I clicked in and out of the other games, but that was the one that got me because I just happened to quite like Bayern Munich. I know it's not trendy. I know it's not skilled. I know everyone's supposed to say, some other really trendy like Dortmund. You're supposed to say Dortmund, or you're supposed to say one of the other trendier teams in Bundesliga too. But I like Bayern Munich. Number of reasons. They actually play brilliant football at the moment. Generally, they're a really good football team. And the left back's one of my favourite players playing football.
Oh, yeah. Remind me of his name. He burst on the scene in the Champions League a couple of weeks back. He had the most unbelievable game. Yeah,
I'd gone to see him a while back before that as well, Alphonso Johnson.
Yeah.
And what a player. I mean, wow, just 19. When's the last time you went to see a left back? If I'm going to that game, I want to see a left back. It just kind of doesn't happen very often unless you want to see somebody maiming someone else. But he's a great player.
And the most ridiculous story as well, from refugee camp to Canada to now superstar in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, you can't write that stuff. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's not because of the journey. It's because of the player for me. But the journey's dead interesting as well. He used to be a winger, and they moved him back to fullback, and he's amazing. Really, really good player. So you stick that on top of the fact there's another thing I've always loved about Bayern, or have done for 8 years and 1 day. There's a very specific number for you. They lost the Champions League final at their own ground, and they were so giving about it. They were the better team against Chelsea that day. But there was no rioting, there was no anger, there was no fury. There was well done, good, well done. It must be a great thing for you. And it was like, nobody reacts like that. It was just so brilliantly German, in the modern German way.
Yeah.
They were so kind, they were so giving, they were so understanding, and happy for the opposition. I've never known a group of people like that, particularly football fans. So ever since then, I've had a wee thing about Bayern. I really liked them.
Mm.
But the football was okay. I don't know what you thought. The football was good. Maybe it wasn't quite the intensity. But what I tried to figure out, and I'm sure you watched some of it as well.
Do you know what? I didn't really.
Well,
I don't have BT Sport, and I didn't feel the great need to go looking for it. I looked at a clip or two on YouTube, and it was as I expected. I mean, we've seen games behind closed doors before, so I just I wasn't frothing at the mouth to see a football game so desperately that I was going to watch a mid-table German game.
It's a bit work for me as well, because I've got shown the BBC World Service every Thursday, so I know we'll be talking about German football this week, so I better know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So there's that kind of that as well, but it's not the hardest work in the world. But what I was trying more than anything else, and I've not been able to find the stats to back up, but I'm going to find them before Thursday. It didn't look as intense to me. The pace didn't look as high to me. But I have no idea whether that's because there was no fans and it just looked different, or whether it was a wee bit slower. I don't know. But I think it looks a wee bit slower. I don't think they're quite there yet. It doesn't look quite as intense. It really just doesn't. But I'm going to check the film.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Sunday Paper Review on Off the Ball.
When he wants to do something, he does it. A hugely impressive person, apart from being obviously a brilliant golfer.
My cousins disliked their dog so intensely that they renamed it Scalacci.
Yeah.
And the dog was called Scalacci from then on.
It's a great piece of journalism. That sums up what he's like. The intro to this is just brilliant. He is an absolute control freak.
Digesting the best stories on the back pages every Sunday afternoon on Off the Ball.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
Right, you're very welcome along. If you've just joined us, you've missed a great conversation between Pat Nevin and Joe from last night's football show. Great show lined up for you between now and 10 o'clock here on OTB AM. Eoin, Sheahan, good morning to you again. How are you?
Very well. What's the crack?
I guess people are kind of finishing off The Last Dance and deciding where they stand on Michael Jordan as a person and his story and who the similar people like him in the world of sport are. And obviously the answer is a very short list of no one really is the same as Michael Jordan. But reading what Horace Grant has been saying about him as well, that it's very one-sided. There were loads of teammates who went back at him constantly, but that it's been edited to make it look like there was only MJ giving out about people. He was the only one who had these standards. Nobody could ever stand up to him or take him on. And like, you know, it's a documentary that's been made by his production company, and it has a narrative to sell, and that narrative is that nobody is ever going to get close to Michael Jordan in terms of competitive instinct. It did tell that story really well, but I'm sure there are other aspects to it.
I would say so too. I would say on the whole, nobody's going to get close to this guy ever narrative. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. I think that it hasn't necessarily, been the documentary to end all debates around the greatest sports person ever. If anything, what Michael Jordan did and the greatness of Michael Jordan actually just inspired a whole new wave of sports people, particularly basketballers, for them to go on and be better than Michael Jordan, for them to go on and actually be more competitive than Michael Jordan. I think Jordan was a bit of an outlier in the fact that he came in at the time when he called it himself the traveling cocaine circus in Chicago, turned a team of misfits really into contenders, and then a good bit of GM work from Jerry Krause to turn them into a team that are the best in the country. And then that's when his standards managed to shine through, to take a really, really good team to consistent greatness. Like, that's the norm now in sport, is it not? That you have those people who are highly tuned in to what they need to do on a day-to-day basis to achieve the best. Now, Jordan may be credited for a lot of that in terms of changing the culture, especially in basketball locker rooms. But this whole idea that nobody will ever be on the same level as him competitively is just not true.
Like, everybody who comes after, though, is standing and following his path. So did we end up wandering into the who's the best basketball player of all time debate accidentally here? And are you saying that somebody can come along and be better? Like, there's definitely a feeling that anybody who comes along after him is just following a prototype, and the originator of the prototype is the best because he had to do that first.
Without question, but like definitely that's at the time. Like, I don't know, if Michael Jordan is born 20 years later, is he still the very best player in the league? The answer to that question is yes, just because he has something about him that would allow him to train himself in a different way. Would he be better at a three-point shot? I think that's unquestionable. I don't think it's you're comparing like with like to say, well, he couldn't shoot the three, therefore, well, not that he couldn't shoot the three, he didn't shoot the three, therefore he couldn't make it in today's game. That's nonsense. He would also be coached differently. He would be brought up differently. He would have started on the weights sooner. Who knows? He might have had a more LeBron James type body composition if he has grown up later on in life. Who knows all these different variables? But there's also a different way of looking at it. Like, if you take the current crop of players and put them back to a different era. Like, I saw Lou Williams saying that LeBron James would have won 15 straight championships was he playing in 1975. So if he was actually playing in the 90s, he'd probably be somewhere in the middle. Of course, today's modern players are better than they were in the 90s, but it's just an impossible debate to have because you can't transfer Jordan into the current conditions.
No, it's true. Look, it is absolutely true. The documentary is definitely giving people the opportunity to look back at that and kind of see what that culture was like. Miguel Delaney's written a piece today saying that there's no one really in football who you can compare to the way that Jordan treated his teammates. Roy Keane would be the closest, maybe Stuart Pearce, but given that football is such a bigger sport, just in terms of the physical size of the actual pitch versus the court, it's impossible for anybody to have such a huge impact. But that Cristiano Ronaldo has that level of personal vanity and drive to be the best that Jordan had. It would have been great to see Jordan given a rival who was worthy of the name. I guess that's the kind of, that when you see the story told over the period of time, that he imagined everybody, even people who weren't worthy of being a rival, were rivals, sometimes on his own team. Sometimes it's just somebody who looks sideways at him. Sometimes it's just the media. But it would have been great for him to have had Ronaldo if he was Messi, or to have had LeBron at the same time in his peak, going up against him and maybe winning titles from time to time, to see exactly where that level of competition would have driven them. Because I think that would have been, you know, that's the one thing. Like, there are individuals along the way. There was an MVP award here and there, and he's like, yeah, I should have been the MVP, but, you know, so I was going to go out and prove that. No one actually ever had the great career. I don't know enough about basketball history, but you can correct this here. No one ever had a great career who's considered an all-time great in that kind of top 3, top 4 conversation.
I think it's a good point, especially if you compare it to today's basketball. My opinion is, I'm definitely of the opinion that the competition to LeBron as an individual is greater than the competition to Jordan at the time. Now, you could say that's because Jordan was better than LeBron and therefore the gap was bigger. But I think if you compare Kevin Durant, for example, with anybody who is considered to be number 2 in the 90s, I think he's better than them. He's one of the all-time greats. Steph Curry during his pomp a couple of years ago, exactly the same in that great Golden State team. That being said, there's a reason why nobody got a look in the 90s was because of Jordan's greatness. And like, I mean, we saw a lot of the bad boys Pistons earlier on in the series. Like, a great team. How great were the individuals? Well, Isaiah Thomas has to go down as one of the best point guards of all time. That Utah Jazz team that we see near the end, outstanding as well, with John Stockton and Karl Malone. And the same with the likes of Reggie Miller and Clyde Drexler to a point. But are any of them on the level of that Golden State team that LeBron has to contend with? Absolutely not. However, if we go back to the start of Jordan's career, it would have been so cool to see perhaps peak Larry Bird or peak Magic during a little bit of peak Jordan or peak Bulls, crucially, because had that Magic Johnson Lakers team being around for that peak Bulls team. I know you're missing it by almost a full decade here, so it's not even close really. But you would have had a greater sense of who the greatest really is, or how great Jordan was, and how much better he was than his predecessors. Like I think there is kind of there's an element here, just if you're talking about standing on the shoulders of giants, that LeBron wasn't as successful because he couldn't have done it without Jordan. Jordan couldn't have had the great success he had on a multitude of levels without Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Like, they saved the league. The NBA was ripe for picking and ripe for someone like Nike to come in and make billions of dollars because of the likes of Magic and Bird.
I get that they're in a continuum in terms of the popularity of the sport, but are they in terms of style of play and, you know, the daring of the breadth of ambition as an individual on the court and how to run a game and how to run a team? I don't know. I don't know enough about the sport to know that, but it feels as if there was something about Jordan's athleticism and eventually where the tactical nous comes from and his leadership skills, which evolve over the course of this from I'm just going to be the scoring leader to I'm going to lay it off to somebody who's actually free.
Yeah, it's true. And I think Magic probably comes a bit closer to that. Like, did Magic or Bird have the mental attributes that Jordan had? Not a chance. And like that's the key thing here, isn't it? The competitive instinct. Like I have heard the argument made before that Magic is more of if you had to pick like a team of players, that Magic might actually be a better all-rounder for your team than Jordan would. He would be better at fulfilling backcourt positions. But in terms of attitude and mentality, no one is close to him. Yeah. I think the Roy Keane comparison is close to spot on. Ronaldo, as you mentioned there, is the only other person in football that I can think of off the top of my head.
But isn't it actually that Jordan is a perfect amalgamation of Keane, Messi and Ronaldo? That's the skill set that we're talking about. That's the level of athleticism. That's the level of personal vanity. That's the level of domination and willpower. It's all of the best aspects of those three players that you would need before. Like, that's the level we're talking at here, no?
I think so. Definitely Keane and Ronaldo. Like, I guess sometimes when you deal with somebody who is so uber competitive and has driven themselves to the highest standards, you do not give them enough credit for their natural talent enough. But you do hear the stories of Jordan not making the high school team. But I guess he was only a freshman when he didn't make that high school team, and he would have made it and would have been their best player later on and during his high school time. You would have heard him in his first couple of weeks in college in North Carolina not being particularly impressive, and then all of a sudden within a couple of weeks he was the best player on the team. And the same to a point, not really. Like I was going to say the same of the NBA. It's not true. Like, I guess he wasn't number one pick is my point. You know, whereas Lionel Messi, he's number one pick all the way through. If there was a draft in football, he was the unbelievably talented kid. Yeah. So for me, Ronaldo and Keane is a much more accurate comparison.
I do want to just, and we're going to move on here, but I do want to talk about the Mayo football team in this context, about how they have been the great rival that the Dubs needed, and they're completely undervalued for that role, even though it's like they're right there. They're right at the level of Dublin. They're just a tiny bit behind them, and this Dublin team is the greatest team of all time. So where do they fit in that conversation? No one ever says that they're like the third best team of all time or the fourth best team of all time. But actually, if we were to objectively measure how close they are to the greatest team of all time, then they have to be in that conversation, and they're not. Nobody will put them in that conversation. Like, and why is that? How do we get to the point where they get dismissed as celebrity losers, despite the fact that they were the ones who helped craft and evolve the greatest team of all time? Not a point that we can get into now because we don't have time, but we might come back to that one. 13 minutes past 8 this morning. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp is back to return to training in the concept of behind closed doors matches. Premier League players have started training in small groups without contact in what is the first phase of Project Restart. But Burnley have become the first Premier League club to confirm a positive coronavirus test result. They say assistant manager Eoin is asymptomatic and will now isolate for 7 days in line with regulations. Eoin is one of 6 results that were positive from the 748 tests conducted among players and club staff on Sunday and Monday. The positive results came in 3 separate clubs. Watford returned 3 from 1 player and 2 staff members, and further testing is due this week. A final decision on the resumption of Serie A will be made on the 28th of May, so 8 days' time. Players are allowed to train in groups again after revised safety protocols were approved by the Italian government. A meeting on the 28th of May will decide whether the Italian top flight can resume on the 14th of June. In racing, just 8 days after reopening, racecourses in Paris have been ordered to close their gates again. The French government say racing must cease in 4 regions because they are deemed COVID-19 red zones. France Gallop's president says the decision to close courses is inexplicable and irrational. Racing is due to resume behind closed doors in Ireland on the 8th of June. Coming up here on OTB AM, Sports Page is coming your way in just a moment. I'm going to talk Lance Armstrong a little bit in light of the fact that he's the next one to get the documentary treatment from ESPN. Kevin Kilbane is going to look back on a decade at the Aviva, including his time up against Leo Messi and the decision to put white boots on for the first time when you're up against Leo Messi, knowing full well that the cameras of the world are going to be on you, certainly the cameras of the Irish Sports Pages. And then the OTB Culture Hall of Fame is Lenny Abrahamson, who obviously is riding high on the success of Normal People, which is doing amazing business right around the world at the moment, to the point where Andrew Lloyd Webber was tweeting about getting Paul Mescal involved in the sing-along, which is like, that is essentially overnight stardom, Eoin. That's like, oh yeah, Andrew Lloyd Webber wants me on Twitter to get involved in a sing-along. Holy moly.
Yeah, it must be absolutely nuts for him. Like sitting there in lockdown in his London apartment. It's always the same apartment we see in all these chat shows, the plain grey wall, and it is literally over the course of 3 weeks turning from somebody who people I'm sure in acting circles knew to somebody that everybody all around the world, from the Kardashians to the Lloyd Webbers, are now idolising at the moment.
His agent is going to be very busy.
Yes, I would say it's been the most insanely busy few weeks for Paul Mescal's agent. Like, and what happened? Like, just imagine it, just being trapped there with your own celebrity in your apartment, just waiting to go out to the world and soak it all in.
I know. I mean, come on. Imagine how great life would be. Like, this is lockdown has been this kind of perfect thing for them up to this point, and now it's like, come on, look at all the things I'm missing out on. Let me out there. This is my time.
He's like, I guess in certain ways, anybody in that situation is now missing the opportunity to completely mess their life up. If I had that level of fame, I would do something stupid that would, I don't know, end me within 2 weeks or something like that. But I'm sure he's got more sense than that. So,
yeah.
Like,
well,
he's...
Look, you know, you'd be ringing people up asking for advice. Colin Farrell, you had a little bit of this. What do I do? Do I have 10 years of hell raising like you did? I mean, that sounds pretty good, right? Especially when you come out the other side and it's all grand, essentially.
Yeah, it's what do you do then? Like,
you hell raise. You hell raise.
You hell raise, but like on a practical sense, like do you move home for a while? Do you go down to the local pub in Kildare, wherever in Kildare he's from, and you see the old fellas at the bar saying that's the fella now who made it good, and then you finally get that pride in your heart.
No, you got LA. You got LA. What are you talking about? What are you even talking about? Leak Slip or LA? Which of these are you picking? Come on.
Leak Slip.
No, it's LA.
LA's supposed to be a bit of a dump. Like, right. I guess he's got to get the huge payday yet as well, doesn't he? Like, I'm sure they're unbelievably well compensated for a BBC/Hulu television show. But it's after the fame where you can start saying, well, look who I am. I can command a huge fee for the next thing. So that's what happens next.
Yeah. Okay. Don't listen to Eoin Sheahan. That's my advice to Paul Mescal this morning. You know, go and have one night in the local pub, all right. But like, get the plane, get to LA, have the crack, do the hell raising, and then.
Can you have much crack over there? Like, I haven't heard of is there a place where you can have the crack?
I mean, yeah. Have you not seen any of the movies about movies? You got to go and watch some of that stuff. That's like...
I'm a huge Entourage fan, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't necessarily scream crack to me. It screams a lot of posing and not a very genuine place, and a place where you can't really relax at all unless you are somebody who's been in the film industry for 25 years. Okay,
that does all sound terrible. Hanging out with the most beautiful people in the world and them loving you. It sounds awful, Eoin. How could you ever survive?
It's artificial love. The lad down the pub in Leak Slip, his love ain't artificial.
Well, not to just pick on Leak Slip, but every small town in Ireland, if he walks in and is like, oh, don't acknowledge that guy now. He's got far too big for his boots. That's exactly what would happen. If he went back to the pub in Sligo, really, like Connell is actually experiencing in the pub in Sligo. It's like they don't like you now that you're gone to Trinity. Who do you think you are, reading books?
I'm talking about the genuine love that the old fella will feel for you after he's had his 7th pint.
Well, we'll talk about all this with Lenny Abrahamson a little bit later on, coming your way on the OTB Culture Hall of Fame in association with Now TV. Now, though, it's time for the papers.
OTB AM.
It's one of the longest openings to the shows that we've done in a long time. Elton looked devastated, and I was furious on homophobia in football. Said Pat Nevin, the conversation that he was having with Joe Malloy last night. We also have Premier League confirmed 6 individuals test positive for COVID-19, which is a relatively low number considering the amount of people that they tested. A world for men by men, more from the brilliant Paul Rouse series, talking about the evolution of women's sport. That's a lecture series that he's given every Tuesday evening for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And then a brilliant piece from Arthur this morning, the unassuming brilliance of John B. Keane's newspaper columns. I was completely unaware of the fact that John B. Keane essentially wrote a column for 30 years for the Limerick Leader, which they've republished over the last while. And he's talked with Alan English, who's now the editor of the Sunday Independent newspaper, who, as the editor of the Limerick Leader, took them back out from cold storage and started to republish them again. And there's some amazing lines in it. He talks about keeping pigs and having 2 pigs and then deciding he was never going to have pigs again because after he sent them off to the butchers, he missed them. And it's just a beautiful story. The column would come up by bus. He would handwrite it out or type it out and put it on the bus, and somebody would get off the bus and deliver it or it would be collected by somebody from the Limerick Leader office. So a fantastic piece there that you should check out on offtheball.com.
The Irish Independent this morning leads to those Jurgen Klopp quotes that you've mentioned. Games without fans won't diminish glory of title. Liverpool boss accepts it's not a perfect package as 6 positive tests emerge ahead of return. Also, this is an interesting line. Wexford lead way with new 10-week club programme. So Wexford County Board have basically said, here's our 10-week programme to get everybody in the club situation in Wexford back out into the pitch. Once the government gives the green light, once the GAA gives the green light, we will be ready to go. So this whole thing about preparing, while you've got a bit of time now to actually get back when things eventually are allowed to get back, that's certainly been a course of action that Wexford have taken. And it sounds pretty good to me. So 10 weeks, each club player could have 4 games minimum. So you'd have 5 weekends of hurling, 5 weekends of football, and you'd get at least 4 games each if you're a club player. And for 2020 and the way this year's turned out, that wouldn't be a bad trade-off.
Well, to go back to offtheball.com for a moment, some breaking news this morning. Ty Kennelly's future with the Sydney Swans looks increasingly uncertain. Here's a story that had been confirmed on the AFL's website this morning that he is one of the coaches at the Sydney Swans who's been stood down, and there's no guarantee that until things return to normal, certainly there's no guarantee that he'll be rejoining the coaching ticket. So obviously a Sydney Swans legend, had been involved in coaching the midfield in the AFL for the Sydney Swans over the last while, and he's been stood down. So you're beginning to see he's a household name in Aussie rules, and he is one of the coaching ticket that has not been reinstated as AFL looks to return. So we send him the very best, and I guess this is just a fairly dire situation in global sport at the moment, where loads of people are struggling to keep their jobs, and I guess that's one of the reasons why football is coming back as well, or they're trying to get football back.
Yeah, absolutely. The back page of the London Times this morning is restart boost as only 6 test positive. Hudson-Odoi trains despite rape accusation. Meanwhile, so Premier League's plans to resume its season next month received a significant boost yesterday when 748 COVID-19 tests produced only 6 positive tests, and saliva on ball may result in penalty runs, is the cricket headline.
Right. Okay, just had to confirm that one first there. The Irish Times next, and there's a Project Restart boosted with only 6 positives from 748 tests, as you just said there. Sean Moran's piece, 30th anniversary of a special year in history of the Rebel County, obviously 1990. They did the hurling and football double. PFA have done a survey of footballers in England. 22% are depressed or considering self-harm. And City likely to learn European ban fate in July. Kind of forgot about that story, rumbling away in the background that Manchester City are not going to be playing in the Champions League if that ban is upheld.
The Mirror this morning leads with Danny Rose's latest comments saying, "We are being treated like lab rats." Angry England star Danny kicks back against plan to reopen this season. And they put the coronavirus story into terms that football people can understand. First day back, and the score is Premier League 748, coronavirus 6. And United Warren fans stay away from Old Trafford, and Tala in line to host Quartet. That is Tala Stadium looking like they're going to host a mini 4-team tournament in July that could serve as a warm-up for Europe for the top 4 clubs in the League of Ireland.
The Star back page this morning for you is Lab Rats, and that's that Danny Rose story as well. Rose says it's unfair to expect players to chance resuming. Hudson-Odoi back training after being arrested on suspicion of rape. 25 years on from the saga of Laois's ghost point, and Klopp, it will be just as intense. So Pat Nevin was saying he wasn't sure if the intensity levels were there in the Bundesliga at the weekend. It'll be interesting to see just how intense football is when it comes back in the Premier League, and whether or not some players will actually take that, let's go out and play, but let's not all risk getting coronavirus from each other here. There's a possibility that happens, right?
Of course, I'm sure the Bundesliga, and as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any big explosion of new test cases or positive cases in Germany since the Bundesliga's return. I guess the sample size will only be after a few weeks of playing that we'll know for sure. But things all of a sudden seem very, very positive when it comes to the Premier League coming back. I think yesterday, having only 6 positive tests, it seems like a huge step forward, and it's starting to seem now like Danny Rose might actually be an outlier here, and Jurgen Klopp being in favour of the return now as well is a big voice to have on side. And I think it would take a fairly significant outbreak within a team at this point for the Premier League return to get railroaded. Restart is on that point. That is the headline in the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Premier League boost after just 6 positive tests. Molly Scott is the photo there in the back of the Irish Daily Mail. She's training in her home in Carlow, leaping over barrels. And revamped Interpros to spark television bidding war. Rival broadcasters gearing up for a potential bidding war to secure the rights for the mooted interprovincial series to be staged at the Aviva Stadium later this summer. So the province is planning to return to collective training at the beginning of June in preparation for August 10th. And on that point, you've got Cork legend Dinny Allen claiming the GAA should follow rugby example.
The Irish Sun, their back page this morning is positive spin. Only 6 of 748 had the virus. Klopp up for comeback test. And that's Dele Alli cycling to Spurs training yesterday on his bike. Fair play to him. And also they've got a picture of Callum Hudson-Odoi back in training.
The Irish News this morning leads with sport can only return at elite level, says Murray. This is Ciaran Murray saying that a recommendation to maintain social distance remains for the year. What chance any of these sports returning at anything below elite resources level? So that's the former Republic of Ireland physio Ciaran Murray saying that the top level will be the easiest one to get back up and running.
Which would suggest that Inch County would have a better chance of coming back before a club. Are we allowed to talk about that? Is that a...
Well, John Horan has forbidden us for everybody from getting that notion now because... Of course, he said the club player would be prioritised or would be going first. I
mean, you might be prioritising them by not having them play just until everybody's aware of things. But anyway, look, it's not going to happen. The Telegraph, their back page there is tester fined for deceptive health claims. This is an exclusive by Sam Wallace. The man in charge of the Premier League's 4 million COVID-19 testing programme agreed to a $58,000 penalty to resolve a court action in the United States in which he was accused of making deceptive health claims for a medical app his company marketed. So that's not a great start. Clubs face $36 million weekly TV rebate if season overruns. Broadcasters due $330 million even if the campaign is finished. So that's money going back to Sky and BT. And Formula One urges PM to relax quarantine rules to save British Grand Prix. So the lobbying from Big F1 is underway with the Tories. You'd expect them to be able to know the right people to be able to get things done, right?
And hopefully they manage to have a word in the ear. Football is getting quite an easy ride from the government, I'm sure, is what they're saying over there. The Guardian back page is Premier League restart boost. Just 6 test positive for virus as players resume training, and fans to return very soon, claims UEFA president. This is Alexander Seferin, who's had an interview with The Guardian, who says that football stadiums being empty will not be a long-term thing.
I missed the Examiner, so here we go back to the Examiner. Kerry, there are no bank holidays for addictions. Kieran Kerry is an addiction counsellor and is talking about the difficulties that many people have, no matter what their addiction is, that it doesn't let up. There's brilliant pictures here from this project. I don't know if everybody is following the project on Twitter, Bringing Our History to Life by Rob Cross. So at RobCross247, and he's been colorising old photographs. So this is obviously pictures of Michael Collins and Harry Boland with the match referee Pat Dunphy, the 1921 Leinster Senior Hurling Championship final between Dublin and Kilkenny. And Kilkenny have their names written across their jerseys. It looks pretty cool. And you'll have seen these photographs probably in your history books, but I've never seen them colorised, so that's a brilliant bit of work there. It was not football as you know it, but it was a godsend to be back in the grass. This is Colin O'Connor's story about the first GAA training session in Europe in a long time, and it happened in Switzerland. And they also have this great story from Australia. Single Aussie rules players seek clarity on bonk ban. Have you heard about this, Eoin?
No, what's the story?
No sex, please. We're Aussie. Aussie rules players are seeking clarity on what media have dubbed a bonk ban. I mean, I don't know if the media is saying that the media has dubbed something is actually like the best arm's length that you can get. But anyway, so somebody somewhere come up with the notion of a bonk ban. A league document, this is the AFL, outlined that players must act responsibly in regards to their sexual behaviour with casual relationships and hookups under scrutiny. Interesting choice of language, but not so much under scrutiny as they're like, please don't do this, lads. I mean, come on. So there are 1,300 people are close to it who are going to be in contact with all the players, and the players included in that. So I think it's really important we follow these rules, said Melbourne Demons defender Jake Lever. I've got a little baby at home and I've got a wife, so lucky for me. But the single boys, there's been a few murmurs around that they're really disappointed. A few of our players are trying to specify what that actually means and get some clarity around it. You can't have people around your place unless you're in an intimate relationship with them, said St Kilda midfielder Jack Billings. I'm fortunate I've got Sarah, my partner, living with me, but my housemate is single, so he's a bit unsure of what the next few weeks and months might look like.
It's always interesting to hear the word bonk thrown around, isn't it? It's always like the word bonk gets an unfair treatment, always used in relation to like casual encounters and things like that, as you mentioned in the piece there. Bonk is never used with someone you love, it seems, and
no.
That's justice for the word bonk is what I'm taking from that story this morning.
It's a very 1980s Sun word. That's definitely how I think it came into being. The message to players is to calm down a bit and just keep the visitors down to a minimum. This is the Collingwood Magpies president. He's one of the old guys. He's like, calm down. Come on. Can you not just, like, for a couple of weeks to get this whole industry back up and running? There's no point going through this if randoms are coming from everywhere, which, you know, the Aussies, they obviously needed to have a word with the lads saying, come on, lads, now, come on, just for a little while. No bonk.
Yeah, that really is. I wondered, like that president of the Magpies, like the Magpies president say, no bonk for you today. Is it in the contracts? You know the way like Wimbledon are covered to get a big payout in the pandemic. I wonder, are the Magpies covered that their players are compelled to not bonk if there is a pandemic?
Are they insured?
Are they insured? I would like to hope so for a range of different reasons.
We've obviously kind of been positive and concerned, and then positive and then concerned about whether or not we're actually going to get any Premier League football this year. It looks now more likely than less likely that we will have Premier League football.
It does. The positive test number from a huge amount of tests is actually quite small, relatively speaking. And like we've seen worse situations come out of German clubs before they actually came out and started playing again. So it looks positive. The template is there from the Bundesliga, and I really can't see a massive U-turn, as I say, on this whatsoever, unless there's just a really bizarre outbreak at this point. And like time will tell a little bit more as well. The longer the Bundesliga goes by without positive tests or a large number of positive tests, then the more chance you give to other sports and other leagues saying, well, this is clearly the template to do it. Like looking into the finances of the Bundesliga, how expensive is it to pull off an operation like the clubs did at the weekend? If there are other organisations around the world who can do it on a lower scale with less of a cost on their output and all that, then I think that there is going to be it's like a domino tipping, and there could be a load of leagues coming back soon or making plans at the very least.
All right, it is 34 minutes past 8. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can WhatsApp us 087 9180 180, or you can always use the hashtag OTB AM. Now, OTB Gold is our series of the very best historic interviews from the last 18 years from Off the Ball, from the archives. The interviews are currently airing on OTB Sports Radio, but in the next couple of weeks, we're going to release them for you to binge on the OTB Podcast Network. So keep an eye out for OTB Gold. We'll publicise it across all of our social channels. But with a new 2-part documentary on ESPN coming soon to whet your appetite, here's our own Lance Armstrong interview in full here on YouTube as a teaser of what's to come. If you enjoy this, get on to wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to all our podcast feeds. You'll also be able to listen to the full Lance Armstrong OTB interview this Friday at 6 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio. Right now on OTB AM, we're bringing you a little part of the interview. Have a look.
You talked about atonement with cycling. You talked about atonement with anti-doping. I hope that I answered those questions. And then you talked about atonement and restitution with others.
Yeah, so Betsy Andreu.
I've apologized multiple times.
The apology hasn't really worked. She's
Brad, but Garrett, here's the thing. You're a big boy. I'm a big boy. She's a big girl. We're all adults here. You can either accept the apology. What I've learned, and you can't force somebody to accept an apology, right? So whether it's the Andreus, whether it's the Le Mans, whether it's Emma O'Reilly, whether it's Christophe Bassons, I've traveled the world to make it right with these people. I have sat in those settings with Simeone, with Bassons, with Emma O'Reilly. I sat with Greg and Kathy Le Mans in San Francisco for half a day. And so I don't know, and not only did I sit there, but I meant it, right? So I don't know what else I need to do.
Well, I guess so. Let's take them.
Most of the people in these positions have accepted the apology and moved on with life.
So the Le Mans haven't, and the Andreas haven't, right? The Le Mans, a person with knowledge of the situation told me that you did indeed meet them for 4 hours, and their report, my source was that your primary goal was to have a press release signed to say that you'd made up with Greg. But the reality is that you didn't actually apologise and never offered to make amends with the Le Mans. Instead, that you claimed during the meeting that you got caught up in the moment.
I don't know who told you that. That's absolutely not true. And furthermore, I'll repeat. I did apologize to them right away, and I meant it. And furthermore, on top of that, because I know that they were concerned about the impact that it had on their children, I offered to travel wherever I needed to travel, to sit with their own children and say, hey, I am sorry about this. And I hope you forgive me. I understand if you don't. But what you just described, I don't know who told you that, is absolutely untrue. And, of course, you don't have to believe me, and I don't have to believe you. I don't have any credibility with these situations, but that is simply not true.
Okay. The point about the Le Mans, I suppose, is the for people who are maybe unfamiliar with the story, in your deposition in the SCA case in 2006, you said that Greg had an alcohol and drug problem, and ultimately Trek chooses you over him, and a $20 million a year revenue business disappears from the Le Mans life. So did you ever think about making financial restitution to the Le Mans?
So I need to make financial restitution because I had nothing to do with Trek's decision to do that.
Really?
Hello?
Yeah, we're still here. Really?
Absolutely not.
Okay, because it seems weird that they'd turn their back on an American cycling hero like Greg LeMond without their star performer, you, who is on the verge of making them billions, granted, but you had no input, no.
I'm answering your question. I mean, you don't have to believe me. I answered the question. If you want me to say it another way so that you're happy,
no, I don't.
Then I will.
We understand exactly what you're saying. There's no communication issues there. You did go after Greg LeMond after he said in that interview with David Walsh that if you were doping, it was the greatest fraud in history. That scene, I think, where you're actually reading the paper is in the Alex Gibney movie. So there was a personal sense of anger towards him, which maybe leads to, some of the language that you use. You don't think you need to make financial restitution, obviously. That's clear.
No, I don't think I do. And here's the thing, Garrett, is I sat in that room, not only with Greg and Kathy, I sat in that room with his lawyer and with my lawyer, and there were plenty of other people in that room, and I apologize to them. Nope, never at any time did Greg and or Kathy say, hey, we feel like you owe us financially, right? And I don't need to get into the details of the conversation. The most important part was that I was sorry for my actions. I was embarrassed by my actions, and I apologized to them, and they accepted the apology.
Okay, I don't think they did accept the apology. It seems that's certainly...
You weren't in the room. What are you talking about?
Well, I've got pretty good sources.
Oh, okay. Okay, Superman. So then what else?
Okay, so let's move on to the Andreas then. We'll leave the Le Mans and maybe we'll reach out to them and see if they want to comment on this afterwards. So with Betsy, I guess it all stems from the hospital room in 1996 and the fact that she testified against you in 2006. Frankie testified against you. There's also now an audio recording of, I think it's an Oakley employee in the room who calls Greg LeMond. This is in the BBC 4 film. And she says that if subpoenaed by Le Mans lawyers, if there was ever a case against you, that she would also testify that what she had heard in the room was what Betsy reported was in the room. To this day, still, you say, actually, I can't remember what was said in the room. Is that still your situation with Betsy?
That is still my. I don't have a recollection of that conversation, and it's a little. I mean, this is where and this is perhaps where Betsy and I can never reconcile. She has a strong memory of it. I do not have a strong memory of it. I think it's highly improbable that at that moment in a patient's treatment process that a doctor would come in and have an open conversation about that in front of a bunch of strangers to him and or her. And so just because of medical privacy laws and HIPAA laws and all of the things that are firmly in place, doctors just don't do that. But that's neither here nor there. What we all know what happened. If I don't have a recollection of it and she does, I'm sorry for the way that I treated the Andreas. I have said that. And, to me, I mean, I would love for at some point for them to accept my apology. But you know what? Some people just aren't in that place and may never be.
When her name came up in your podcast recently with the interview that you were doing with is it Ben Foster, the actor who played you in the program, that movie, you said there was like a pause when he asked you the question. I don't know the specific wording of the question, but it was basically suggesting that maybe there was some underlying motive in how she was defending her family that went beyond defending her family. And you went, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. It doesn't really sound like you're making amends to a woman when that's, a pretty terrible thing to say about her.
No, and you didn't. I don't know if you just listened to 30 seconds of it. I said, listen, I want to be very respectful. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I don't want to create more of an issue with that family. And so I don't know if you missed that part.
I heard that. I heard the whole thing. Yeah, it was a really interesting interview.
Good. Glad you liked it.
But it did seem kind of, there was a gap there. I don't know. It just didn't seem like that was. It seemed like you still have something against Betsy, that you're still. You weren't like, no, hang on a second, I'm going to stop that right there. It was more like, whoa, we're not going there. And then there's room for people to fill in that gap of about 30 seconds before you get to that. I want to be very respectful. But anyway, maybe we should move on from this because I did speak to Betsy in advance of this and she said that I can say on the record, Lance has not made amends. I don't want anything from him other than for him to stop lying about me. When he was smearing me, very few in the media contacted me. So I just wanted to put that side of it out there. Michele Ferrari, let's talk a bit about that because you put him in the Alex Gibney movie. And I was astonished by that because at that stage, Michele Ferrari is one of the world's most recognised doping doctors. He's had a conviction, granted it's been overturned, but the world and his wife knows that Ferrari is dodgy, and you let Alex Gibney go and interview him and see all the stuff that's there and, you know, show some of the science that you guys are working on. What was your motivation in sharing Ferrari with Gibney?
I mean, Alex Gibney was in charge of that project, so that was not if Alex wanted to talk to Ferrari, then that was done on his own. You'd have to ask Alex about that.
You didn't nix it, though. You didn't say, no, hang on a second, you can't do that.
No, I mean, you'd have to ask. Alex is I think, more independent than that, and I don't think that he would have. I don't think that's the way he operates.
Ferrari, though, obviously, you know, you paid $1 million to Ferrari over the years. You could have said, listen, please don't talk to this guy.
I mean, yeah, I guess I could have.
So why didn't you?
Why didn't I say what?
Don't speak to Gibney. Don't do anything here, Michele. This is a house of cards. It's going to come tumbling down, and it's going to bring you and me and everybody we know down with it.
I don't know. I wasn't at that point. I wasn't that involved, and I wasn't that worried about. I knew that this was all going to be out, whether it's via documentaries or books or cases with testimony, depositions, etc.
Okay. Did Michele Ferrari ever offer to supply you with a motor for your bike?
Absolutely not.
And did you ever consider using a motor for your bike?
Of course not.
Well, this is interesting, right? Because it's degrees of, like, what's the difference between using the best EPO and using a motor? I'm kind of interested because we're hearing that the motors and mechanical doping is something that there's a big story brewing, something's going to break. And, you know, it would be very interesting to hear, like, you guys were the best and you were determined to win from 99 onwards. And it's around this time we think that the Hungarian inventor starts to offer people stuff. And if I was in possession of a motor, the first person I would go to would be you and say, here, listen, what do you think?
Okay. And your point?
Did you ever use a motor?
Absolutely. I just told you, absolutely not.
And as a matter of interest, why? Like, what's the difference between doing that and taking EPO?
Gare, what are you? Are you a complete rookie? What are you? I mean, in 1999, nobody even knew you could put motors were for motorcycles. What do you? I mean, are you out of your mind?
No, look. I
mean, honestly, seriously. I mean, first of all, I know that that's topical. I know that there has been a rider caught with a motorcycle or with a motor in their bike. But what? I mean, are you crazy?
That's the end of that. Well, it's not really. There's a bit more of that you can listen to. We will release the full thing on the OTB Gold podcast network, but the full thing is now available to watch on the Off the Ball YouTube channel. And yeah, sometimes it's nice to wrap yourself in the warm embrace of old stuff, Eoin, right?
Yeah, it really is, Gar. It's such an entertaining thing. Like, you remember the interview he did about the interview afterwards, right?
On his podcast?
No, it was in the Times, in the UK Times, or the Times Ireland edition. It was with Ewan McKenna. It would be much funnier if we could curse at this time in the morning, but yeah, maybe just check that up, because I'm not actually sure I can say any of the words in this sentence. But he concluded it by saying it felt like an assault.
That interview felt like an assault?
Yeah.
All right.
I thought it was... I completely forgot about you're a big guy, I'm a big guy.
What do you mean by that, Lance? You call me fat? Is that it? Because that was one of his favourite insults. Like, he would, obviously, with his near 0% body fat, I was like, I mean, really? You're like, I'm sure he's never even seen a photograph. We weren't doing a video interview, unfortunately. Like, this was in the old studio before we had got the cameras. I'm really, now, having listened back to that, quite looking forward to the documentary.
Yeah, like, I mean, he is everything you want in a villain. He's got a great story. He's conniving. He's charismatic. He obviously has an amazing track record of actual villainy, which helps when you're a villain. And at this point, he just fits the mold perfectly. If he actually turned out to be a legitimate hero, I'm not sure would that have actually fitted the characteristics that he has. He was always born to be a villain, perhaps.
He was. I mean, I still think there's an outside chance he could be the president of the United States. I'm not joking. I think that there is room, and I would say that in his head, this documentary is like a part of that kind of like, maybe, I mean, you look at what Trump has done, you look at how elections are working, he's very famous, he'd like Texan, the base, he'd reach across partisan lines, you know, he's got those 7 yellow jerseys. Like, I think that in 30 years' time, we'll be looking back and going, wow, that was a pretty interesting second act. And it all hinged on that documentary that everybody, in lockdown, everybody watched it and we're like, look, sure, Michael Jordan, win at all costs. It's just the same thing.
No, he's not going to be, he's got, this is a situation where he is trying to repair any sort of semblance of respect that people have for him and for himself, I guess. He wants to be able to just sleep a little bit sounder at night. That is what
people don't care. He sleeps very well at night, I'm sure. The people don't care about stuff. Like, it also happened in Europe, which doesn't exist in many Americans' minds. Like, it's not a real thing. There are some NBA players that think the earth is flat. That the dinosaurs were a made-up thing. Like, I'm not ruling that out. One thing, though, like the whole point about Michele Ferrari and giving a documentary maker access to your doping doctor, that's the biggest egotistical stupidity I've ever seen from anybody who's supposed to be really smart. Like, why would you allow an investigative journalist to go and talk to the guy who's been doping you for your entire professional career? Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense.
Yeah, like I wonder, does he kind of look back on the clandestine nature of what he did and what he achieved as a yellow jersey in itself? That he's like, look, I pulled off one of the biggest heists. Like, heists are cool. Money Heist is flying on Netflix at the moment. Like, they pulling things off, being a criminal, GTA glamorized being a criminal, all this sort of thing, bending the rules is something that can be fashionable if you were the right character. I wonder if Lance is looking back and saying, yeah, I fooled you for years, and look how cool that was. Like, obviously there's been cases since and stuff that are far more serious that makes it sure that it's never worth it. But I wonder deep down if he's like, yeah, that was amazing how you guys all fell for it.
Yeah, but then he got caught, so that kind of it didn't end. That's not a story that ends well. He's telling that story from like in a heist movie. Whoever's telling that story is telling it from a prison cell.
Jail.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. This week on OTB AM, we're in search of the greatest football moment in the Aviva Stadium. Kevin Kilbane will join us next to chat through some of the contenders and also talk about the day that Leo Messi played in the Aviva against Kevin Kilbane. But just to let you know, the first semi-final is now live on the Off The Ball Twitter account and you can vote there. So here we go. Shane Long versus Germany, or Ciaran Kelly's penalty shootout heroics. 4 successive penalty saves, a world record. We're going to be back with Kevin Kilbane in a moment, but first, we're going back to last night's Off The Ball, where Paul Rouse joined Joe for the latest episode of our History of Sports series. Enjoy.
Okay, because when I think of the suffragette movement, funny, the sporting aspect is the one that lingers in the memory, 1913, and Emily Davison jumping in front of the horse.
Yeah, so Emily Davison she was a fascinating person. She was an English suffragette for those people who don't know her. And in 1909, she wrote her favourite quotation, which was, "Rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God," on pieces of paper. And she tied them to rocks and threw them at the carriage of the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, David Lloyd George, as it drove through English streets. By 1911, she came to believe that the suffragette movement needed an actual martyr to bring it the publicity that it needed. And then, famously, in 1911, she ran out in front of the King's horse during the Epsom Derby and grabbed the reins of the King's horse and died. Her funeral was an epic spectacle, what happened afterwards, and what flowed from that, both in terms of people were repulsed by what she did people are utterly offended by it, and others who are inspired by it. So it's a very singular example of women using sport to make a political point about their position in society. And you would almost have imagined that sport should have been a perfect place for women to demonstrate their capacities, and that it should have been an opportunity to kind of reinvent women's place in society, and not just as a vehicle for dramatic gestures. And it was up to a point, but only to a point, because the Victorian world was also, it was a profoundly male world in terms of how people were supposed to be and supposed to behave.
Right, Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, is marking the 10-year anniversary of the official opening of the Aviva Stadium and its proud long-term sponsorship of the iconic venue. To celebrate this milestone, Aviva are paying tribute to some of the most iconic sporting moments of the past decade. Feel free to join in. You can follow Aviva Ireland on Instagram and Twitter. You can share your favourite Aviva Stadium memories using the hashtag #SafeToDream. Kevin Kilbane is with us to look back on the time that Leo Messi came to town. Kev, watching a little bit back at this and doing a little bit of research, it came to my attention that you're wearing a very snazzy pair of white boots.
Yeah, I think I got them for that game. I started wearing white boots at that time as well, and I'd always had, what I used to wear through my whole career was the black Nike, black Tiempos. I wore them for virtually my whole career. Certainly when I turned pro anyway, I think that was more often than not I'd wore them. And then Umbro had then become my boot supplier probably when I was about 30. So anyone that knows, when you wear white boots, you actually feel as though you get a little bit of pace, or you gain a little bit of pace. So I started to wear white boots after looking down, thinking I was quick. So yeah, in the white boots, yeah, there you go.
What was
like brand new? Sorry, but is this the first time you've worn them? You're taking Leo Messi, first game of the Aviva, here we go. It's the new me.
Possibly. I'm not saying that's guaranteed. I definitely wore them from then on after that game. I probably had them, maybe broke them in training that week. But I think the first game, I think, I'm not positive, but I think it was that first game against Messi, yeah.
Because you played through the pivotal era of white boots. I'd imagine the view on white boots is vastly different when you were 15 to the view on white boots when you were 30.
Yeah, but honestly, it was so funny because the turnover, when would that be? Late 2010 it would be, or through up to 2010, maybe late 2000, from 2005, 6 onwards. Anybody that walked onto the training ground in a pair of white boots just used to be slaughtered, and they'd probably have them on for 1 or 2 days and they wouldn't wear them again. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, the naturally gifted, the more flamboyant players started to wear them, and then it just become a bit of a thing. I never thought that we'd then, only a couple of years later, start to see the orange and the reds and the everything, but everything changed then. And yeah, fair play to everybody now. Yeah, it's a different game, isn't it?
The other bit of research that we dug up from this was a rumor from about 5 years ago that you guys all got 10 grand a man not to kick Leo Messi in that game.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was a great quote. To be honest, I hardly kicked him anyway. I think he nutmegged me once as well in the game. I wouldn't have minded seeing that money, let me tell you, Jay. Yeah, but I was going to say, what did you do with it? Yeah, we didn't get 10 grand. I went to Cheltenham with that 10 grand. That was it. I blew it all in one few days, or over a few days. No, we didn't get 10 grand. There was talk that the FAI were paid a lot of money for that game as well to try to protect Messi. I think even obviously Di Maria scored in the game, but players like that as well who had very high profile at that time. But no, definitely not. We did. None of us saw any money anyway. If the FAI did, who's to say? I don't know.
Come here, like preparing for a game against Messi. Like, you're all professionals. You've all played against really good footballers in the past, but like this is a game for Ireland where you're opening a new stadium. Is there chatter amongst you in the build-up? It's like, we can't actually wait to see what he's like.
Yeah, we played some high-profile friendlies over the years. We'd had Brazil games. We'd had some. I'm trying to think some others as well. We had Brazil. I remember even the Brian Kerr. We had Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo, Ronaldinho came to Dublin and things like this. But this is probably a little bit different. I think certainly I thought anyway. I was obviously coming to the back end of my career and to play against Messi. And a lot of the players, even then in those high-profile friendlies, we were always talking in the build-up, are they going to play? They may get 10 minutes. They may show up. They may not. We don't know. But Argentina went with a strong side. Certainly for the first 45, I know a lot of them changed. I think we made a lot of changes during that game as well. So the talk, I suppose, was, are they going to actually play? But once they played a full strength side, and once we realised that in the dressing room, it still was low key. Don't get me wrong; it was a relaxed game. There was definitely a good feeling around the game because of the opening and things like that. But I think it gave the Irish public the first chance to see Messi in the flesh in Dublin. So that was great. Yeah.
How important was it for that team to get home as well? Like, being in Croke Park was really not the perfect venue for football. To get back to the Aviva and start trying to turn it into something, and over the period of the next decade to build it into a place where other teams are actually not happy to come.
Yeah, that is a great point, I think, on that one, Jay, because it did start to turn sour at Croker because results obviously weren't coming. If the results were there, we were getting some big results there, and everything was going smoothly. There would have been no issues, I don't think. But certainly the performances, I think that's the way it would be. Performances weren't great, and I think the stadium, I think obviously the pitch was affecting us because we just didn't feel close to the supporters there. It wasn't the ideal pitch for us. I think that's the way we all felt at that time. So getting back to the Aviva or Lansdowne was a massive issue for us. I think we all wanted to. We were all desperate to get back and play. And I think the point that you make there on turning it into that little bit of a fortress, it probably still isn't that now. And I think we're all maybe accepted that. Maybe 10 years on, the stadium is just magnificent. But there's been very few big days there. You know, I know that you guys are running the poll at the moment for the greatest game, greatest night there at the Aviva. But we haven't had many of those, and that's been the case. I think we seem to have gone. I mean, I came into the squad in '97. When did Lansdowne get knocked to mid 2000s or whenever it was, and we still never had. During that time, I felt as though that we had great moments, and whichever team came in, and even maybe you'd look at it and think of the so-called lesser teams like Sweden's and Poland, and we'd come and we beat them. It wouldn't be an issue. We'd feel as though, yeah, there's not a problem with these teams coming in. But I think it has got away from that a little bit now, where there's not that real fortress there, that real fortress, wanting a better phrase, a real test when teams come into Dublin. And I think that we have lost that a little bit at the Aviva, without a doubt.
The one time that it did feel that way, I think, is and Johnny Walter's 2 goals against Bosnia. That was one of those nights where, and partly it was down to his performance in some respects, because that was one of the hardest running, most single-minded, brutalising the opponents physically and mentally here from Jonathan Walters that night that I remember.
Yeah, I remember that game, of course, as well, and that's the way it seemed to be. I remember John watching that game with John, and he was cropping up in every single position, it seemed, on the pitch. Left wing, right wing, left back, right back, wherever it would be, just doing his job for the team. And that, I think that sort of performance maybe did epitomise how the team did play whenever teams came to Lansdowne before that. That maybe that crushing feeling when teams used to come and didn't really enjoy. Maybe there was a little bit of a negative feel around the old Lansdowne, the stadium itself. And I think that was maybe the issues that maybe the Aviva now certainly doesn't have, because it's just such a beautiful stadium, and sides can come and enjoy playing there. But that performance in particular, maybe from Johnny Walters and the rest of the side, I think that was maybe a bit of a throwback to times when sides really knew they were in a game when they came to Lansdowne. Yeah.
We're looking to rank the top 10. How do you put that one up against the Shane Long goal against Germany?
I think that's the greatest night, Shane Long, the greatest moment. Anyway, I got a ticket for that game, actually. I was up behind the goal, and it was right behind the goal that Shane Long scored. So it was, I think, when you finish playing, it's different, because I used to think back to when I was a kid, where I used to get nervous in the lead up to the Irish games, and it was feeling a bit like that. It feels a bit like that even when I'm working on the Irish games now, whether they've been at a major tournament or whether they've been, any of the qualifying games. But particularly around that game, because we know that we needed a big result that night. We didn't play particularly well. It was a really solid performance. But that one big moment was like McAteer. It was like McAteer all those years before against Holland. It was just it was a perfect ball played over the top, albeit, inadvertently played over the top from Darren Randolph. Shane Long's pace got him away. And the buzz around the stadium, I think that was the first time at that stadium where there was a real buzz leaving the stadium. I mean, and I'm talking a real buzz. Anybody knows that's been to Lansdowne and been to the Aviva over the years, when you walk away from a game and you get that real buzz of watching an Irish side, that's what I felt when I left. And I didn't get the chance to go and watch Ireland as a kid at Lansdowne, because obviously we didn't have the money to get over and watch games. So that's when I really felt like a fan leaving a stadium, having that buzz around such a big occasion and such a big goal.
Was that Germany team the best team to play at the Aviva so far?
You probably would be, I'd say so. Yeah, I mean, certainly you look at Messi and all the Argentine sides that were brilliant at that side. But yeah, there was nothing on that game, of course. So yeah, I'd definitely say world champions. They were top notch, weren't they? So yeah. And you probably got the list in front of you there as well. I don't remember off the top of my head now what that team was, but I remember it. We didn't have a chance, did we? There was no chance given to us prior to that game, and that was a top class side that we played against. Yeah.
Any other great moments from the last decade that kind of stand out for you, either as a fan or as someone who played there?
No, I don't. None that. I mean, I think it's almost been. We might get one big occasion, or one looking forward to a big night. Obviously the Denmark game. We're all. I remember specifically saying, even in the lead up when we was in studio leading in up to that game, look, let's look for a big night. Let's look for a Germany night. We've not had too many big nights at the Aviva, and that has been the case. That I'm sure that Stephen Kenny, I'm sure he's mindful of that fact, that he's been to the Aviva, he's watched the team over the years playing there. That we, of course, from the suggestion is that we're playing a different brand of football. That, of course, will help. But it's the big night. Sometimes it's about getting a result against all the odds. And we've managed to do that over the years. And that's what certainly happened in that Germany match. And they're the memories that supporters have for years and years to come. So there's nothing. We talk about the Bosnia and the Germany game, but they are the two standout nights, the two standout results. I'd feel, yeah.
We need more of them. Basically, that's the thing.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And the stadium is so good now, and that's the thing. We've got a world class stadium. We've got an amazing facilities. Yet we've not necessarily turned in consistent performances over a long period of time, and that's what we need to start producing now. And that's the one thing I think we're all looking forward to in the next few years under Stephen Kenny. Absolutely.
One of the things that was fairly obvious to us in the long time that we've been working with you is that you're not particularly prone to nostalgia. You don't have a massive memorabilia collection, and yet there is a picture of the game that we're talking about over your shoulder, right?
Yeah. That's. I didn't. I'll get it down for you. Yeah, I don't really have too many pictures. Honestly, I don't. So yeah, that's I suppose when you play against the greatest player to ever play the game, then yeah, that's Messi and I together on the same pitch. So that's a nice little memory. Certainly, when I look back at my career now, I can certainly reflect upon that night playing against him. Yeah.
Was it worth it, Kev? Was it worth throwing away that 10 grand to put in that challenge?
Well, you probably see from that challenge, he's knocking the ball past me, so he's away from me on that. I was flat on my arse at probably 2 seconds or a second or so after that picture was taken, but it looks good. It looks like I'm about to hack him down there, yeah.
Well, to talk to us about that, the way Lionel Messi manages to knock the ball past the opponents, because it's something that John Giles was talking about on the show recently when describing Maradona, that Maradona is the all time when it comes to beating players, and perhaps Messi actually just isn't as good as him when it comes to beating a player like that. I'm not sure if that's something you'd go along with.
Do you know what? I mean, Messi, I love Maradona. Maradona was the first real superstar that I saw as a kid. We'd heard and maybe seen small footage of, seen footage of Pele to a certain degree when I was a kid growing up. But Maradona, Mexico '86 was the first World Cup that I watched, and I fell in love with Maradona when I was a kid. And as a left footer as well, I just loved him. So I fully realise that, and after watching so much football over the years, the consistency on Messi, I think it stands him above anybody that the game has ever seen. lads like John Giles will always have the arguments on the players that were played in certain eras, and it is, the argument will go on and on and on. But Messi is, what I was going to say there, just playing against him. He's in first and second gear, I think. He didn't necessarily show anything that night where you think, wow, this guy. But I remember just coming up against him, and one-on-one defending was never my forte. I was always when I went back and played left back, I would always just support from behind a little bit, just get your distances between the guy you'd be coming up against, try and get it right. Wasn't necessarily slow, but you could maybe just gauge it with that. But maybe because of my length of leg, it took me maybe 2 or 3 steps to get going again. But certainly playing against him, it made me realise how good he was. Just on a couple of occasions, just that little bit of movement, that the step onto his right foot, check back in onto his left foot, always coming in field into bodies. But it was how quickly he could check back across you as well. There was you couldn't stop him, essentially. He only maybe did it 2 or 3 occasions to me in the game, or maybe even 1 or 2 occasions actually, because of maybe the game itself and how low key it was. He didn't really put too much effort into the match, but I could see just on a couple of occasions how good he is, and it was just one of those moments. As I said, you can just look back and think, yeah, managed to play against him, yeah.
So it's the speed at which he turns direction, it's the close control. They're 2 of the things that take him to a stratosphere above everybody else.
Yeah, definitely, and the change of pace. When you're watching him, sometimes you're watching Messi, and I'm actually watching that Barca documentary on Netflix at the moment, which isn't the greatest. Don't get me wrong, but when you're watching footage of Messi from up above, he isn't that naturally that quick. You can see that, but his pace with and without the ball seems exactly the same, and it is that close control and the pace that he's moving with the ball at speed when he's going at players. Players can't turn and adjust, and he's able to turn and adjust and check with both his left and right foot at that pace, and players can't adjust to it. And that's why you can see him gliding past players when he goes on the inside onto his left and then immediately back out onto his right, because a defender up against him can't adjust his feet quick enough, because the feet always seem, I mean, it's hard to explain, I suppose, really, but if I'm going up against a player, usually I try and show him the line. So I try and angle my body on the pitch, try and show him the line, but Messi has that way of checking back in onto a right foot of a left back, and when he does that, then he's immediately checking back onto your outside. So you can't adjust your feet quick enough, and that's why he immediately gets away from you, because of the pace that he's running at.
We also have another picture here of him towering over you and winning a header as well. What size, Leo Messi?
5'5" or something, is he? I don't know. Show the picture. I need to see it. Can I see it? I've not seen it yet. I can't see it there.
What size are you?
I think I was probably trying to read something a bit different, Jay. You know, or maybe just letting him head it on. There was no one in behind. There was no threat, and I was maybe allowing him to do it. I think. I don't know.
All right, I can
6'2", yeah, 6'2". Yeah, towering over me.
I can share my screen here so you can have a look at the photograph, Kev. There you are. In fairness, yeah. it's just a great leap by Lionel Messi. Really.
Yeah, as I said, there was no threat in behind me. I just allowed him to go and win it, and then it would go harmlessly through to Shea there, so it would have been fine.
Absolutely.
It's the athleticism, though. There is like a weird innate athleticism, despite the fact he doesn't look particularly athletic, and he doesn't use his athleticism in a traditional way to create space.
Yeah, I know. That's it. Again, just maybe reverting back to that documentary, the header that he scored against Man United in that Champions League final. Not too sure of the year, but you could see the athleticism in that header on him. How he's maybe travelling a little bit away from goal. He's got to direct the header back on target. You can see his athleticism. And do you know what, Jerry? I think a lot of modern players as well now, certainly from the early teenage years now, working on plyometrics, working on various things. The athleticism is there with, a vast majority of professional footballers now, because of the work that's been put into them from when they're such a young age.
Kev, quickly, just the return of football. I mean, obviously, you're keeping a close eye on this. It was back at the Bundesliga at the weekend.
Yeah.
We're about a month away yesterday, from the return of the Premier League. I know the Premier League getting a lot of criticism for not seeming to have a coherent plan, but like the country was in a complete mess. So they were right, I think, to bide their time and let things play out and then come back when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, I think the criticism is always going to be there. From what's happened, nobody foresaw what was about to what was about to happen, and I think in these sort of situations, it would always come down to just be cautious, just take your time. And I watched a little bit of that Dortmund game at the weekend. It's strange watching the matches, but if that's the way it's going to be, if that's the way it's got to be in the coming weeks and months and years even, then that's the way it's got to be. We've just got to accept that is it. And I think every league in the world, it is just strange that some of the leagues across the world have decided, look, just to cancel the seasons, and then some are going to phase them back in. But I think, as we know, certainly with the Premier League, it wouldn't necessarily be about, we'll give Liverpool the Premier League title and everything will be fine. There's so much more. There's so much at stake with promotion, relegation, and things like this that I just feel as though that there's going to have to be a phasing on how the season's going to be restarted. No matter when it's going to finish, we can always restart further down the line, and that's the way it's got to be.
Yeah, let next year year take care of itself, and we can worry about that then.
Absolutely.
But for now, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. Yeah.
How's lockdown in Canada?
Quiet, pretty much the same, really. Weather hasn't been great. We've had a bit of snow in the last week or two, so that's not been great either. But weather's just turning a little bit really here now, so hopefully now we'll start to look to better days in the future. But no, I mean, I think it does. No matter what anybody says, it just puts everything into perspective. You start to think about everything and think about maybe even talking about this sort of game, little things that have happened across the course of your life and where you're going to and what's going to be happening. So, just maybe reflect a little bit on what's about to come as well. But no, happy, so happy, couldn't be happier really, and everything's great.
Well, you're looking well.
Good man. Good man, yeah. I need a haircut. I'm getting like Owen. I was saying that before. We both need haircuts now, yeah.
Is there
no cut?
You can do, yeah. Is there nobody there who can help you out with a bit of a cut? Would you not try it out yourself?
I've not cut. No, I had it cut really short. Literally, probably a couple of days. So it was very short actually. So it's just a bit of a mess. A bit of a trim with the scissors here and there, just on the fringe. Get the clippers out to shave my neck, the back of my neck, and that's been pretty much it really. But now it's getting a bit of a mess now.
I'm just impressed it's growing back the same colour, Kev. That was the important part.
Jay, you know that. I tell you, the stick would always come on the hair dye. Never, ever would I ever do that. Never. Yeah, it's the no, never. I say that. Yeah, I said I'd never have a spray tan, and I did. So there you go. It's the Ackle roots. The Ackle roots. You know, that's what it is. No, definitely no hair dye. No, I'm not at that stage yet. No. Right. Are you younger than me, Jay? Sorry, I don't know. Sorry, believe that.
It was my birthday this week.
Is it?
I'm going grey disgracefully. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he looks well. He's got it natural all the way.
Distinguished, I believe, is the word.
Yeah, natural.
Okay, great stuff. Good to talk to you.
Well done. Cheers, Jay.
Thanks very much. A reminder, Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, is marking the 10-year anniversary of the official opening of the Aviva Stadium and its proud long-term sponsorship of the iconic venue. To celebrate this milestone, Aviva are paying tribute to some of the most iconic sporting moments of the last decade. Feel free to join in. You can follow Aviva Ireland on Instagram and Twitter and share your favourite Aviva Stadium memories using #SafeToDream, and the semi-finals will take place today. We'll be back in a minute.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
They had one more day to rest. We were really in trouble to build the team.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
Oh, sweaty palms. Of course, you guys know what it's like, but that was nervy, yeah.
The OTB Brief, online every morning from 7 a.m. on offtheball.com, the Go Loud app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
The OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
Brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
Right, welcome along to this week's edition of the OTB Culture Hall of Fame. It's brought to you in association with Now TV, where you can stream every episode of the unmissable new show Gangs of London on the Now TV Entertainment Pass, which also has a 14-day free trial that you can avail of. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had some great guests. Stephanie Preisner was on talking about the US office. We had Kenny Cunningham on talking about Fawlty Towers. We had Louisa Harland from Derry Girls on talking about Kamara. And last week, Paul Howard put Columbo into the OTB Culture Hall of Fame. So it has been a disparate group. And I'm delighted to say this week we've got Lenny Abrahamson with us. Lenny, how the hell are you?
I'm not too bad at all, Ciaran. Nice to be talking to you both.
You've caught lightning in a bottle.
That is a nice way to put it. It seems so. Yeah, it's been a really, really mad, I think 3 weeks pretty much now since the show first came out on the BBC. And I can say hand on heart that none of us had any idea that it would become so, I don't know how to even describe it, but it's sort of this, yeah, it just became very big and people talking about it and making memes about it. And yeah, it's amazing.
Was there a point where you kind of went, oh, Andrew Lloyd Webber is just tweeting my star and wants him to get involved in a sing-along? Or was it Khloe Kardashian last night going, I want season 2? When did you kind of pinch yourself and go, what happened here?
Yeah, it was all of those things, and it was quite quick because I remember the day that it came out, which was a Sunday on the BBC iPlayer. And much as you might want to tell yourself that you're not going to you're just going to be chilled about it, of course you're checking social media like crazy to see what people's reactions are. And the reactions were unbelievably strong straight away. People were watching it in a day, and it just seemed to become this thing. And I think after about 2 days of that, I thought to myself, and I said to my wife, I actually think this, I honestly had this feeling for the first time in my life, am I actually dreaming this? Because the comments were sort of, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It was all these things that you might write if you were, or you might daydream, some people were saying. And so I thought, and I woke up about 3 days later and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do something complete. I'm not even going to check social media. And I thought I'll listen to a podcast, and I sometimes listen to the BBC Coronacast, which is all their top journalists. I thought, well, I'll just listen to some miserable news from Britain and that'll bring me down. And the title was Normal People and Something Else. And the first 10 minutes were dedicated to them talking about how much they've been watching Normal People over the weekend. So yeah, that was the point at which I thought this has just gone a bit weird.
You must be the only person in the entire world who's actually gone to seek out grim news to actually try and give you some sense of normality during this whole thing.
Totally, because I'm not used to feeling. I tend to be. I'm most at home in a slightly miserable frame of mind. So I wanted to go back to my sort of heartland, and sadly that was not possible.
Lenny, it's unbelievable. It's like, can you put your finger on why people feel so strongly about this? Why we're all sitting here trying to contain ourselves by not binging it too quickly, feeling so passionately about the two main characters, about this entire television show. Why did this happen for the audience?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, first and foremost, it's Sally. It's the book. And the feeling I had when I read the book, which was a sort of sense of like proper intimacy with these characters, just like, I don't know, it's deceptively simple the way she writes, and she goes really deep, and she appears just to be sort of effortlessly describing what people are doing and thinking. And I don't know, the effect of the book was very strong, and and what we had to do was to try to preserve that in a very different medium. So there's that, and then I think it's also got to do with lockdown, probably to some extent. I mean, I think people are probably feeling that bit more emotionally open, or a little bit raw, or also that whole idea of intimacy for a lot of people, which has been taken away by this, is such a kind of charged one. I think there's that. And I think, I mean, the quality of the show, the cast are incredible. And maybe the one thing I think that's probably, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, it's like we've managed to somehow sneak in under the radar a sort of art house like sensibility, and this I just did it the way I would wanted to do it. But looking back on it, you think there's some odd thing, which is the combination of this very compelling story and the moment that it lands, nuanced and delicate than is the norm on television. And they didn't sort of flick it off because it has the weight of the book behind it and because it's a love story, and that in itself is a strong engine. And so in the end, people, the reactions that you get sometimes on social media, it's like somebody over time, a film or a piece of television that speaks in a sort of more or less honest voice, or a different voice to the one that they're used to, if that doesn't sound sort of too big a claim. And I feel that might be it, that it's sort of, oh wow, because I've had those feelings from films all my life, but they've tended to be the sorts of films that aren't massively mainstream, and this carries that into a more mainstream environment somehow.
I'd be keen to hear what those sort of films are, because certainly from episode 1, I'm thinking Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise. Straight away, that is the mood I get, which is quite a statement. I don't think it's hyperbole, Lenny. I think even in a year's time, I'll think that, and I think a lot of people will think that down the line as well, because this sort of format, delving yourself into that, especially on mainstream television, it could blow up in your face. So, like, why do you think it? Like, I don't know, just being on that level immediately, it just really stuck out to me that this was something special.
Thank you. I mean, I think there's definitely the Before series is in there for sure, and there's little bits of I don't know, some little bits of Gus Van Sant, in places maybe as well. And I was trying to think of just a sort of tradition of naturalism with that kind of poetic like accent sometimes, which for me is the kind of, it's where I tend to be drawn as a filmmaker. It's what my sort of natural space to work in is. And I think with this, we did talk about it as we went, and the only pressure I felt at all and we had really good executives on this, both from the BBC and Hulu, but the only pressure that ever came was around the very beginning, because people in television land, everybody worries about somebody just tuning out straight away, because there's so much other stuff you could watch. So there's the finger on the trigger of the remote control. You don't have that problem in a cinema. You've got people captive for a little while anyway. And so people really felt, well, does it need to be a bit hookier, at least at the beginning, and a little bit sort of glossier and a bit more like, let's tell the audience what sort of thing this is going to be, so that they can rub their hands together and sit back and go, okay, I'm safe. But our feeling was, and we weren't like, it wasn't, taking some moral high ground. It was just a deeper sense that if you did that, the rest of the episode and the rest of the series would sort of feel like an odd disappointment, or a kind of a shift, in some odd shift. That the only way to do this was to tell it truthfully, skillfully, and trust that people would hold with it, which is why we felt, I think all of us felt, that it would be strongly reviewed, but unreasonable in terms of its audience reaction. So that was the mood we had when we went into those first days, which was why the sort of explosion was so mad. I mean, it really did not, it totally took us by surprise.
Does this speak to a change in audiences, that they've been conditioned to spend much longer now with a box set, where if you look at a lot of box sets, you could any of those long documentaries could actually generally tend to be 2 or 3 episodes less, but people watch them to the end because they decide that they're part of this. Tiger King is a perfect example, where it came out, everybody watched it in one weekend, and you get to the far side of it and you're like, that was really a 90-minute film that they made 7 or 8 episodes out of.
Totally. And there's a podcast thing in there as well. Like, you'll get these long form podcasts where they really, really eke it out, and you think, well, this could have been done in 2 or 3. But I think you're right in the sense that I think audiences are traditionally underestimated. That's something that people on my side of the camera say all the time to funders and studios, that people are much more capable of experiencing things, subtle things, than you give them credit for. And I think, having said that, expectation is a huge part of it. And I was saying to myself and Ed Guiney, who's the producer and somebody I've worked with all of my career, we were just saying that if you tried to make Normal People as a film, you would have been told straight away, okay, this is a small art house release, guaranteed. Think about what's in the cinema at any given time. You know that this is IFI plus a few other cinemas. And actually, the odd thing is that the distributors who would say that to you would probably be right. That if you released it really broadly, it would die in the cinema in a way that it doesn't on TV. And I think that's because, and it's a slight worry, it's a big worry really. I think people have sort of now decided that the big crash bang wallop tentpole experience is what the cinema's for. And television is where you can meander and dive into the richer territory. And I hate to see that happen, but it seems to be what's happening.
I would love to watch Normal People on the big screen after saying that right there. And I think anybody who's out there would say the exact same thing. You're right though. It does seem to be the way that studios will fund things that are bigger because you've got more of a canvas right in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And to get people out of their houses, the sense is they won't go to, I mean, it's not completely true and things do buck that trend, but the bottom line is for cinema, if you want to make something complex or, low key, maybe is the right word, unless it gets major nominations, it's really hard to get it through to an audience.
You're, as a filmmaker who makes movies, that's something that you're concerned about. Is the other side of that coin, though, that this tapestry of television now is so broad that you can actually really delve into stuff in a way that, a short Normal People on the big screen would be really good, but short. And now, yes. Who knows? Maybe Khloe Kardashian gets her second season.
No, you're absolutely right. If I'm not here to facilitate Chloe's entertainment, I don't know what I'm here to do. But you're right, because I mean, we didn't choose television for this because we thought, oh, it'd never fly in the cinema. We chose it because we felt it was the right place, and for exactly the reason you're talking about. It needs, because it's odd actually. It sort of goes against what you might initially think, because it's quite slight in a sense. Like there's no major dramatic, center to it. It's just this study of this ebb and flow in a relationship. Putting it into a short sort of feature form would force you into finding an arc that was a bit artificial. Whereas in this case, we could really, each episode, study that phase of their relationship, give it space, give it time. And like, in the end, it feels like it's as substantial an experience as reading the novel, which I don't think we would have managed to do in a cinema form. So yes, you're right. Like, I think what I'm feeling now is, okay, there are challenges in making films for this big screen, which I'm still intending every bit as much to do. But actually, television isn't some sort of second best. It's just different, and you can do amazing things there. Which would have been impossible 10, 15, 20 years ago for sure.
We've spoken before about your Emile Griffith project. Does something like the success of this change how you frame that in your head, and suddenly you think, actually, that's a 3-part, 90-minute, or...
In that case, no, but there are other things that I've been doing where I do think, actually, yes, that could be a 3-part. There are a couple of projects which are really, I don't know, there's also there's a whole kind of, the way stuff's funded and the kind of power that the big streamers have in terms of just how much money they have to spend, and the way they calculate success versus a cinema release. The streamers calculate success. It's not like they don't pay to see that specific thing. They're keeping a large base of subscribers loyal, and they're attracting more subscribers, which has a different sort of incentive for them. And it's very different how they calculate success. A film is brutal. It's just that box office, versus the cost. It's really hard. But okay, so leaving that, so there are projects where you go, man, that may be too big, oddly enough, to do as a film, because it's a difficult project and it's expensive, which is those two things make a film very hard. Whereas actually, if it's a prestige piece of work, a streamer might be interested in it for all sorts of reasons. So you look at Roma, or you look at The Irishman by Scorsese, projects which are, you know, particularly Roma, very hard in the cinema space because it's a big, serious study of something. But actually it became this huge phenomenon on Netflix because, I don't know, because it just operates differently there. So yeah, I think with Emile, though, just to go back to your question, it for me is quintessentially a film because it's a study of, to do it justice, to do him justice, it needs to have a sort of monumental feeling. Like, I think his life was in some particular way kind of enormous in terms of its significance, you know, like both thinking about race, thinking about sexuality, thinking about like America in mid-century, and just the operatic tragedy of what happened between him and Benny Perret. It feels to me like that can have that setting, that kind of super concentrated setting of the film is right. But then there are other things where I think, you know, yes, for both practical, financial, and also aesthetic reasons, television might be the thing.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that all, what the art forms evolve into over the next period of time. One of the other things that's been really gratifying about this has been the rest of the world learning our cultural language. You know, the Debs and Gaelic football and Trinity. That was obviously very important. Like, this was a discernibly, this is set in Ireland. And
yes.
It's not set anywhere else. And when we were growing up, we watched American stuff and high school and English stuff, and it was all very alien. And yet the stories are kind of fairly similar. But it turns out the universal teenage experience, the universal early 20s experience, love is love.
Yes. I mean, it's just a brilliant thing when I think about what you were saying. Like, do you remember, like, when I was a kid anyway, if anybody on British media or America mentioned Ireland or said something about Dublin, you go, oh my God, we exist. We've been validated in that moment. And to think that there's a sort of an Irish show which set, you know, like, it's very unapologetically Irish. Like, we didn't change any of the language. We didn't soften the accents or anything. I think that can travel is amazing and is a sign of sort of a big shift, I think, culturally. But it was important to us to keep it authentic. And I have to say, to be fair to the American sort of streamer and to the BBC, to Hulu and the BBC, there was never any pressure to, you know, change grinds to something else or, you know, find ways of explaining the Debs or, you know, or any worries about showing the GAA. So that was like, it just, I felt like we'd come out of something, do you know, that idea that you could tell. I mean, it blows my mind really that we have this effectively fairly intimate Irish story. And it's not people coming in and making a sort of version of Ireland. It's our own reflection. And that can travel to teenagers and older people in, you know, the Midwest is kind of amazing to me.
The GAA aspect of it is obviously something that we've been talking about. Eoin gave his blow by blow exactly of how it happened, and that conversation with Malachy Clerkin happened on Twitter, where it did emerge, in fact, that this isn't the first scene that we see where Connell scores a goal. It's actually the third or fourth.
Yeah.
You just yesterday, because of the force of public opinion, you were forced to release the rushes. So here we go. What happened?
So yeah, we're thinking we've got it all work beautifully, and then that fabulous save, which you can see Paul. He's going. How did he? Yeah. And then now this wasn't a great shot. And what's funny is we said, like, I said to him, I said, look, yeah, try and save it, you know, because it looks terrible if you're letting it in. So go for it. Thinking that, given that we put Paul in a position where we knew he was going to be just a few yards away with an open, with a clear shot, it would be fine. And then he pulls off two great saves, and I had to say to him, look, I'm really sorry, but because we had this thing I haven't said on Twitter, that day there was a terrible storm, and we could see the clouds coming in. And there was just this general fear that we wouldn't get the shot. So I said, look, just for this one, like, you know, please don't save it. And then I felt really bad that he was getting all this, the keeper's at fault stuff. So Nathan Nugent, who's the brilliant editor that I work with, he said yesterday, I found the rushes of the saves. And I said, yeah, come on, let's put this poor guy out of his misery.
How good a footballer is Paul Mescal in reality when he's on the spot like that?
He's very good. I mean, he was rusty and he hasn't played for a while. But as soon as he got the ball into his hands, you could just, and it's odd, like, because he's the gentlest person and he's incredibly generous with other actors. And if he had, like, if he feels like a scene should go a certain way and another actor is playing it differently, he'd never, like, in quotes, pull rank as the lead. He'd always, like, be interested in the discussion. However, when we're shooting the GAA stuff, it was like a whole different person comes out, and it's like, you know, whispering in my ear, that lad can't play again. You know, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's like that thing of sport, it's just the competitive thing would come up in him straight away, and you could see that he was a real player.
Do you think he could have made this if somebody outshone Paul Mescal in the audition but wasn't as good at GAA as him?
I think we would have done something different with that scene. I mean, we might have done it in a more impressionistic way. What was really nice about this is we could actually stage it like a real game and know that he'd look okay. Like when I did what Richard did, I think Jack Rayner be the first to see he's not a rugby player. And so even though there were ideas early on that we would see rugby in the show, for various reasons I took that out. But one of them was I just thought, like, unless the person really can play, you're going to end up with Escape to Victory or, you know, or Invictus or something. Which is like, the pain of that will be too much to bear.
Can I just ask as well, Lenny, just like, it's very obvious what the on-pitch depiction of GAA is, and again, it's brilliant. But the off-screen depiction of the GAA is quite interesting as well, and not the GAA as a whole. I mean, the rural young fella who plays GAA and what that says about the young Irish male. I mean, we see a conflict at Connell so many times in your episodes early in the season, and what that says about masculinity. I'd be just keen to get your thoughts on that and what Connell tells us about the young people in our own country.
Well, it is. I mean, I think it's great that in the last few years there's been more of a conversation where people, even, you know, young guys in sport are prepared to talk about, you know, difficulties they might have had or mental health problems or stuff that every human being has to go through. And you can feel that the taboo around that's kind of breaking down, which is very healthy. But of course, it's not completely broken down. And you see in Connell that kind of conflict between a person who, and I've always been interested, I think one of the things that drew me to this book was I've always been interested in characters who are successful or liked but don't understand why. That, I think, is a really interesting, it's a sort of an odd position that again Richard has in what Richard did, which is to kind of be the person that everybody looks to is a very odd thing if you don't feel internally like you sort of understand what that's about or that you can carry it in a way that convinces yourself. And so Paul's character in Normal People is afraid of all sorts of things and at the same time kind of tied in and kind of caught in this model of how he should behave as a young Irish male. And sport's definitely part of that, you know. I mean, the thing is, I think, as we always talked about it, Paul and I, he loves the sport. That's not a performance. And that's one place he's able to, like, actually, oddly enough, it's the physical where he feels most comfortable with her and with sport. You know, both those, that's like, he knows himself there, but outside of that, he's very lost. I think it's probably part of this Sally's novel and the show is part of a movement where you can see, and I hope it filters through all kind of aspects of society, where young men don't feel imprisoned by the idea of masculinity, you know, where they feel that that's a broader space to operate in, where you can be unwell, or you can be worried, or you can, you know, you can be sort of low, and that's okay. And I, you know, my sense of the GAA generally, because my son plays, you know, he's 12 and he was about to be 12, and he's played in the club since he was about 6. And I didn't grow up with GAA, but I realized as time went on, you know, with him, just how good the organization is, and how kind of positive it is in the lives of the kids that are doing it. So it was nice to be able to bring that to the screen and just, you know, like show it well, like shoot it well. Just that thing of, you know, I've never seen it on telly before, done, you know, in drama like that. So it was just nice to be able to do it, give it the treatment, and do it properly.
Why did you change it from soccer to GAA? What was the impetus for that?
Just felt it was more interesting to see. And actually, why not? Because it's going to make something international. And, you know, let's make it as unique as possible. I think it was totally valid. Like Sally's choice of soccer was, she knows that soccer is a, you know, strong in Sligo, and so it was totally valid. But I just thought, well, why don't, for the sake of this show, let's make it GAA. It was kind of my own thing as well, my own sort of liking of the organization, and also Paul. You know, if you have a guy who's played at a level, it would be sort of crazy to not make use of that.
How big is the role of the director in creating an unbelievable on-screen chemistry between two actors?
I think you can blow it as the director. And I've seen things where people I know, like where it really is good and it's been ruined, or there's just not the same sort of, it's not looked at in the right way. But you can't create it. You can't, you know, and what happens if it's not there, if it's not really there, is you have to do more work as a director to explain to the audience that what's happening is a deep attraction. You know what I mean? You have to give them those markers. You have to say, you know, you become much more active in a bad way as a storyteller. In other words, you're sort of telling people how they should think, depending on, you know, using all sorts of devices like music, the way things are shot, use of sort of patterns of cuts around looks and things like that, which just make it very like they met and they were instantly attracted, is what you're saying to the audience. Whereas if there is that chemistry, and it's not, and I should say this because it's really important to say, it's not that the two of them are, it's not that Paul and Daisy are romantically attracted to each other. It's actually, it's a creative kind of chemistry. It's a spark and a play and a thing they do that is just like, you know, in the same way that great dancers can sell a dance because they're tuned into each other. It's the same with the actors. Like, so people always think, oh, if it's like that on screen, then they must be mad about each other off screen. It's not like that. I mean, that can happen, but in this case, it was just like a brilliant creative partnership, like, you know, musicians playing together or something like that. And once that's there, I think the skill of the director is to find ways of having the audience feel like they are discovering it rather than being told that that's what they should think. And that's the thing I'm most interested in directing something like this. It's like sculpting the attention of the viewer so that they feel like they are sort of present with almost complete access, but not total access. So there's still that last leap of trying to understand what's going on. And if you can get a person into that kind of active watching space, the things that they see and discover are so much more powerful than if you just sort of, you know, pull back the curtain and present them with the finished and digested story, you know. But to make that work, you've got to have a thing really out there in the world. You can't, you know, and that's what Daisy and Paul gave me. They had this like brilliant chemistry, and then we could just like approach it quite glancingly and you'd still really feel it. And that's much more powerful, I think.
We're about half an hour in here and we haven't actually spoken about what you're going to put in the OTB Culture Hall of Fame just yet. Yeah.
So the OTB Cultural Hall of Fame is brought to you in association with Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for on Now TV. We've had various different things. Andy Lee picked Rocky 3. Dermot Kennedy picked Gladiator. Stephanie Preisner picked The US Office. We had Columbo by Paul Howard last week, which had the interesting bit of trivia that Steven Spielberg directed the first ever network episode, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
You've gone for something which I hadn't heard of until you actually brought it to us this week. The Detectorists.
Yes. So The Detectorists, I came upon it sort of by accident. I saw Mackenzie Crook and Toby Jones. Still, I love Toby Jones, and I was interested in what Mackenzie Crook was doing post The Office, and unless he was delivering the mail, and I just switched it on, and from the moment it starts, there's a beautiful piece of music, and I can't find it at the moment, but I'll dig it out. It's the title track, and it's like a sort of British folk ballad, and that sets the tone for the whole thing, because I'll tell you what it is just two guys living in a small rural village in England somewhere, who are members of the local metal detecting club, and they go and they try and find bits of old, Roman arrowheads or whatever, and with the idea that one day they might sort of unearth some fabulous piece of treasure. But really, it's just a space in which you can watch them talking to each other, and they're both sort of a bit lost, and they're both a bit sad, but it's beautiful. It's like, for me, it's like a more sophisticated, contemporary, and very beautifully made Last of the Summer Wine. And it kind of gives me a feeling of, I found it just really peaceful to watch, as well as it's funny. I mean, it's a comedy, but it's a single camera comedy. And what that means is it feels like it's shot like a drama, and it's very beautiful to watch. And I've always had this penchant for English folk, across the range, like folk horror stuff, like Wicker Man kind of territory, but also just folk music and the kind of countryside, which I find really fascinating. And I just love it. It's I highly recommend it. It's very beautiful and really simple.
And is there lots of it? Are there many seasons? Or is it one season or
2 seasons, as far as I know? I'm not sure if there's going to be a 3rd season. But it's definitely 2 seasons. And the Toby Jones character has this, his ex lives in the village with her new partner, and he's very sort of macho and, everything that Toby isn't. But he's desperately dedicated to his wife, and she uses him relentlessly for like errands and things, and he's always willing to sort of drop everything and help her, even though she's with a new partner. And it's just beautifully drawn. I think I have a sort of, I love comedy. I mean, I've always had I've always loved watching good comedy, but the stuff which has just that right amount of pathos it's a very delicious kind of combo. And I think it's written by Mackenzie Crook, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And that's, just super impressive.
That combination is something that we were speaking about with Louisa Harland on the show a little while ago. I think it was actually in the context of Dairy Girls, to be honest with you. And I haven't seen this show, but having looked at one clip on YouTube, you can kind of get the sadness that you mentioned, and you can get how much you root for these characters. It's the clip I watch is when they find a piece of gold. Yes. I'm like, if I'm invested in this, I'm in floods of tears watching this.
Totally. And Toby's character plays a little bit of music, and he writes a song for his ex, and it's a good song, but it's also, the whole thing is so like, oh God, it's so painful, but it's beautiful. And they, it's I really, really like it. It's the sort of best of that character-based British kind of tradition, which goes all the way back to music hall and then comes up through the sitcoms into this slightly more sophisticated kind of contemporary version. But it's right part of that tradition. And most of the stuff I watch I don't watch things for comfort usually. I kind of, but this one I find very like a balm. I could watch an episode of it just to sort of make me feel the world is okay, which of course it isn't. But it's not bad to feel that once in a while.
When you say you don't watch things for comfort, are you watching them with your professional eye then, or what are you watching them for?
I think I'm mostly watching things for like that sense of stimulation, that thing that just, whatever it was that got me into films in the first place, that sense of something like that cuts through, or that, for example, recently, I'm trying to think what I've been watching. There's a great service called Mubi. I don't know if you know it. It's like, there's 20 films available, and then one drops off each day and a new one comes on, and it's by really interesting directors and like back catalogue stuff as well. So things you might not otherwise see. So I might just go onto that and watch an old French film, or an odd contemporary curiosity from somewhere else. And I just find that I love that stimulation. So that would be my normal kind of way of watching. But I do occasionally, and I watch with the kids, I watch sometimes Outnumbered. I don't know if you ever, the BBC show, Hugh Dennis, and it's just it's a really well scripted family, kind of chaotic family sitcom, really good. I like it because there's flailing parents and the kids watching that.
I presume you haven't watched Normal People with your kids yet. Is this something at some point in your life you're going to like sit down with them when they're like 25 and 30 and go, I made this?
My daughter's 9, right, going on 16, and she is in it. She's got a small part, like, so when Connell goes to the Debs with Rachel, there's a little sister character, which is Nell, my daughter.
Right.
Because she wants to be an actress, and I was hoping that might put her off, but she's really like it. And we said to her the other day, I said, okay, now I'll show you that bit, right? And I can show you some of the other bits, but when it comes to the sort of like, sort of adult bits, we're going to have to skip on. And she said, her line was, where's the fun in that? She said. So I think I will be trying to, I like when they're sort of, 16, I think it'd be a good time to watch. I'd like to have seen something like that when I was that age. My son is like, he would run, 100 meters to get away from a sex scene. So he's 12, but I said that will change pretty soon, I would say.
What was it like putting Trinity on TV for everybody to watch? What was that experience like as somebody who went there?
It was nice, actually, because it's such a particular place. It's hard to shoot in Trinity. It's like, it's quite, for obvious reasons, they're just very careful about letting people in. It's quite bureaucratic. And so there's that kind of slight thing on your shoulder all the time about how long you have. You have to specify where you'll be at each point in the day. And so you've got all these mini deadlines. So it's not like a leisurely kind of, trip down memory lane. I really enjoyed the scouting, because we got to pick the places, and I picked some places that were kind of significant to me, like parts of the library that I used to study in, and it did then bring back, being there like late in the evening and things like that, did bring back memories. And I also like the fact that Trinity's been used quite a bit, but it's almost always used as another, like doubling for another institution somewhere else. So it was good to be able to show it as itself. And yeah, I enjoyed it, and I just enjoyed the sort of, it made me feel old, because, it doesn't feel like that long ago to me, but then you go back there and you just go, Jesus, I can't believe how old I am, which is generally the experience of life past about 40 anyway, isn't it? That you just kind of constantly remind about how old you are.
Can I just ask on that? Does the content of Normal People make you feel old? Do you kind of feel wistful for your youth while shooting it?
Yeah, I think I feel wistful in that particular way that I think Much Longing has, which is you're actually wistful for something that you didn't quite have, Like, I don't think I never let myself, I was never as honest as the characters are with each other when I was that age. I was definitely too sort of caught up on myself, and I think there were definitely relationships that I had then that could have been fantastic, but that I was probably the reason that they were curtailed, But it does remind me of the energy of that age, and of the kind of I don't know, the sort of, and that, you know, you look at children, it's even more extreme, that sort of sensory openness that you have. But just the emerging into a new phase of life is such an exciting time. And that's you know, having kids probably is the last of the, or one of the last of those. That's a truly kind of expanding thing. Most of the rest of it is a kind of gradual, you know, shrinking again. And so I think probably it did make me feel, I mean, wistful and for some aspects of it, and longing for some aspects of it, but also quite glad that some of the aspects of it are over. You know, the tremendous self kind of analysis that goes on, and the sort of, you know, that kind of fraught, those fraught relationships that you have in your early 20s. And I don't miss aspects of it, but some I do for sure.
Whenever Conall was giving out about people in his English tutorial not reading the book, I was like, oh my God, that's us. That was our English tutorial right there. We had a couple of Conalls in our class who were brilliant and did all read the books, but there was a story in our WhatsApp group immediately afterwards of somebody who was in one of those tutorials in English in Trinity who had borrowed notes on a book he was due to present on, and the class started and they went to him and said, right, your turn. And he opened the notes that he'd borrowed and he couldn't read the writing. So he had to confess not being able to read his own writing to the tutorial. And the tutor was like, I mean, I'm not really sure I believe this. But there was a few of...
God. But, you know, it's just to say, well, maybe just summarize your thoughts. If you know, don't read them exactly.
The book was good, I think. Thanks very much. So it was triggering in many aspects. But I think it brings a lot of energy too, right? That's like immersing yourself in this and understanding this world and how you've escaped from it, I hope, by the time you're in your 40s.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, just the thing, I feel so, you know, again, it's a total cliche, but I feel really lucky to do the work because you get to visit these parts of life that, you know, it's like every project brings you to some part of the world or of life or of corner of yourself or other people that you wouldn't otherwise get to visit. It's an amazing privilege to be able to do that.
And look, to wrap this up, would you be interested? Is it possible that there could be a second season?
I mean, we've never talked about like a direct second season, but one thing that has popped up and floated around every so often is, and this would go back to your point about the Before series, would be to revisit the two of them in 5 or 10 years, which I think would be really interesting because I think there are such great characters. They're such kind of well-drawn characters and they exist now. And it feels like there's got to be something really interesting to say with those characters after life has sort of taken its toll for a number of years to see what that looks like. So who knows, that might happen.
I think in the Before series, it paints youth as a very exciting thing. Your late 20s, early 30s as a decent thing, and then marriage is absolutely horrific.
I know.
So maybe normal people could follow the exact same path. I'm not sure.
Maybe we try and turn that around. And God, let's hope.
Lenny, always great to have you with us. Thanks so much for making the time.
Total pleasure, and thanks for having me and for all the interest in the show. Really appreciate it.
It's been brilliant. Thanks a million. So that's this week's OTB Culture Hall of Fame, brought to you in association with Now TV, where you can stream every episode of the unmissable new show Gangs of London on the Now TV Entertainment Pass, which also has a 14-day free trial that you can avail of.
The OTB Culture Hall of Fame,
brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.